We have Mr. Dr. Eddie Joe on the podcast,
What's
baby.
up? What's up?
How you doing,
hey,
brother?
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming, dude. I have had a lot of doctor dentists on the podcast, but I've never had like
Dr. Professor.
Dr. Professor on the podcast. So it's really cool. Thanks for coming, bro.
Hey.
And I've never had like someone who has like very similar hairstyle as I used to have. I just cut it off a few days ago, but
there's a lot of hair volume.
dude,
in this room
what's the secret? Like if people want to have like
I can't
voluminous hair.
I cannot reveal these
You're not
secrets.
gonna do that?
That's some paid content right there.
Is it really?
Hey, if you get some sponsorships from some hair product brands, then maybe I'll
then
come
we'll
back
talk
on.
about it. Heck yeah. Did you
yeah.
always want to be like in academia when growing up?
No, not at all. It wasn't even a thought,
Yeah.
as a kid, like a lot of kids, that love sports, they
Sure.
want to become like a professional athlete or like maybe work with athletes or something related to sports.
So were you a sports guy growing up?
Yeah. I like my dad was an athlete as a kid in South Korea. And so, not even as a kid, just even as an adult, he was an athlete. He played baseball, and he's a real athletic guy. And still to this day, he's in his 70s, but he looks phenomenal.
Yeah.
He just has that like really health conscious, fitness conscious mindset. So
Sure.
in any case, like as a kid, he put me in like every single sport, which in retrospect, that was probably a bad idea because I just never excelled at like one thing.
So you're just like the
was just-
jack of all trades type of dude.
Yeah,
You're like,
I was mediocre at everything,
Yeah, yeah.
basically. And so, baseball, basketball, football, all those sports I played. But I love sports. I
Yeah.
love the competitiveness of it. And so, yeah, we were just, I just grew up around sports.
what was
and
your favorite sport? If you-
Probably, I would say it depends. Like when I was really young, baseball was it. I was obsessed. I'm a
Really?
huge Angels fan. And
Okay.
so I love the Angels. And then, I was always into football.
Okay.
Watching, now they're old heads, but yeah, watching, like Marshall Falk
Sure.
and all these guys playing, and then basketball. I'm diehard Laker fan,
Yeah.
since I was a kid. So those were the main three.
Okay.
Then, my dad put me in tennis,
Yeah.
and he never really put me in golf, but that's what I'm obsessed with. Like,
Now,
obviously,
yeah. That's
Yeah.
funny because like I don't know, like I grew up in a pretty Asian household as well.
Yeah.
Or I'm assuming you did as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
And like my mom would never let me play football
Really?
because she was just like, you're gonna get hurt, right? And I didn't see a lot of Asian guys like play football at all, like when I was, and then baseball wasn't really a thing either.
Yeah.
And basketball, like you're tall for an Asian guy, but like a lot of Asian dudes aren't that tall.
Yeah, we try to play tall, but
Yeah,
never
we have
really
to
worked out.
like make our hair like 4 inches
I
taller,
know,
bro, so we
right?
could say
I'm actually only 5'3".
our hair makes us 6'3" guys.
Yeah. But yeah, so but academia, like even through high school, even in college, man, like working in academia, working as a scholar, researcher, or professor just wasn't like on my radar.
Go ahead and bring that a little bit closer to your mouth, or yeah, there we go.
Here.
Yeah.
It wasn't really on my radar. So I went to college.
Where did you go?
At Long Beach State.
Okay. So
Yeah,
SoCal boy, all the way through.
Yeah, and in high school, I always had this sort of like entrepreneurial mindset. I was always interested in business. I was like slinging like,
In high school?
Yeah, like I was making like I'll just create my own brand and just sell T-shirts. Like I'll have it printed on these like ghetto
What was
Hanes.
the first brand?
Dude, it was like, I think it was called like Shaloon or something like that.
Shaloon? What
Yeah,
does that mean?
I don't even know. It was just something like we just made up.
Yeah.
Me and my buddies,
Yeah.
and then everyone just kept saying it.
Okay.
We didn't even know what it means.
Sure.
And then
so you printed it on some shirts.
yeah, back then it was like the skate wear, the surf wear was like a big thing. So
Okay.
it kind of like, it's like the new skate surf brand.
Did it do well?
No, I mean, it was just like around in our high school.
Yeah.
I went to Sonora High School, and then we just started slinging these T-shirts, and
Sonora. Is
yeah.
that where they have like the camp that like kids go to?
I don't know. It's in La Habra, Brea, Fullerton area.
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it in like the mountains area?
No.
over there? Okay, I
It's
think that's
definitely in the
something else.
suburbs.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyways, I always had this like this sort of interest in business, and so I never was that interested in going to college, to be honest, which is ironic because I'm a professor.
That is ironic.
But yeah, I just always thought like, I feel like I can, and this is before like YouTube, social media,
Yeah.
before all this like information was available
Yeah.
to us. I mean, we were still using like dial-up.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you know what that is.
No, I don't. What is
Yeah,
that?
dial-up, dude.
This is after encyclopedias, right?
This was before Wi-Fi. You actually had to connect to your phone line.
Oh.
And it was to the point where if your like parents picked up the phone, you get knocked off the internet.
Oh,
Like
wow.
this is like so foreign to you, but
Sure.
like that's how we grew up. And
But
so,
like I had, I mean, this is like after, because at my house, my parents still had encyclopedias like all over.
Yeah.
Right. So this is after that, I'm assuming.
This was like the next phase after encyclopedia.
Okay.
And there was only like, there was no Google and all that.
So like, what would you do with this dial-up?
Yeah, so that's how you connect, right? You have to use your phone line to connect to the internet.
Okay.
And there was this one service called America Online, AOL.
And that was kind of like
that was like our
Google at the time.
kind of, yeah.
Okay.
And that's just the service that you use to like just access the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, you know, even without all this information that's readily available to us as it is now,
Yeah.
like I was still like in the mindset I could always learn just from other people,
Sure.
you know. But you know, being in an Asian household, a Korean household, like college is such a big thing, especially for like immigrant parents who didn't have the luxury of
Going
getting
to
a
college,
college education. So I felt, honestly, I went to college for my parents. Like, not really because they forced me to, because they never did, but because I felt like I would be doing them a disservice because they sacrificed so much to come to this country to give us, me and my sister, an opportunity. So I went to college and I didn't know what major. I was going to do business like everybody else. My dad,
I guess why didn't you do business? Because like you had this entrepreneurial spirit. Like,
Yeah, so
why didn't you do that?
Interesting enough, I just and we'll probably talk about this later, but I picked up a job as a personal trainer at a LA Fitness in La Habra, and it was. At that time, you didn't need any certifications.
What?
Yeah, I swear.
You're lying.
You can go online, do this like online certification for like $50, $60, and you'll be certified. Obviously, times have changed because obviously
serious?
liability, right? Yeah, back then you could just
Like you could have no experience.
No. Like, I mean, experience in terms of working out, yes, but like in terms of like knowing the human body, like knowing anything about exercise sciences, no, they did not care.
What?
Yeah, and so
What year was this around?
this was, oh my gosh, now I gotta like, I was 17.
So no, like what year?
What year was this? This is 2000 or no, yeah, 2000 around there.
So around 2000, like gyms didn't have like strict like
no
structures.
Trust me, like it was bad. And so yeah, so I graduated high school. Man, I'm like, it feels like so long ago. Yeah, around early 2000.
So
yeah,
you were personal training at around 17, 18.
yeah, 17, 18, and
That's pretty young.
yeah, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just like working out clients the way I just work out myself, which is, you know, in hindsight, that was probably the wrong, like,
What was like back then? What was your, I guess, programming for these clients?
oh my God, I'm like, quote unquote programming. Like, I don't know, man. I was just like, make them sweat, make them burn. And everything I did back then, like with now, like the knowledge that I have now is like, was so wrong.
Sure.
But, you know, at the end of the day, it's just like, I was a kid and I was just like, you got to start somewhere. And I'm so thankful for that time because it really like sparked interest. And so that's how I sort of got into the major that I picked.
Was it kinesiology?
Was a kinesiology specialization in exercise science.
Sweet.
And I didn't know that existed, man. And then
now you're a professor of kinesiology.
I've been in the same field
science.
since college, since undergrad. I've never changed my major. And so I talked to someone who was a businessman, and he was like, you don't learn business in college. And I was like, you can learn a lot of things in college, but you don't learn business in college.
Why do you think? Why do you think so many people go to college to study business? Then
I have no idea, but I'm sure like nowadays there's so much research on like, you know, business management or just finances, economics, and all that, where you might need a classroom setting and a professor who does research all that stuff to disseminate this knowledge to you in a more structured manner. But you can still learn that on yourself. And I think people do need that extrinsic motivation, like someone to just like regiment it for you, like your education in business. So, but I know there's a lot of people that I've met over the years who are intrinsically motivated to learn, and through the power of the internet, you know, they're able to find resources. And so I think one of the best skills that anybody can learn is just being resourceful, you know, and having the resources to educate themselves. And so But yeah. So this guy was just like, pick a major where you could develop like specialized skill or knowledge, right? And I was just like, he's like, what are you interested in? And
you're like, I love lifting weights.
Yeah, I love weights. I was like 215, 220 at the time, just like powerlifting. Like all I did was
bench, squat,
and squat, deadlift. That's all I did. And
really?
and so I was just like kind of a meathead. And so
were you like a bro science guy at the time?
Kind of, yeah. Because at that time, what do we know? This is when like I remember creatine just came out. We're like, oh shit, what is this? And then we would just all take it in high school, and like no one knew what it was.
I know, they're just like people are just consuming this white powder in your system, and you're like 17, 18 years old, and you're like, this will make me jacked. Everyone says it will, but you don't know the science behind it.
Don't know anything about it.
All these kids are taking all these like human growth hormones now, and like creatine, these protein supplements. They're like, but they don't know like what it does to their body actually.
Yeah, they had no idea, but that's just kind of the mindset. I was a young guy, I don't know, and so all I knew was lifting weights.
Did you compete at all?
No, I was just I don't know. I think kind of because it was coming off of like football. Like I was playing football in high school, and I got really into lifting weights, and then from like my freshman to like my senior, I like gained like tons of muscle mass, and I was just into lifting, and so that's just all I knew.
Yeah.
But that was an interest. It was a hobby of mine, and I just kind of loved. I remember just like it, like I had to like know why my body was changing and why I was getting stronger. Like I had to know like these. I had to have the answers to these questions, and it was basic questions of human physiology. Well, really.
Why did you have a desire to find those?
I don't know.
Answers?
I just can't explain. I think it's just like, why are you interested in this or why are you interested in that? Like
you just are.
It's just you are. It's just there's no external like source of like you being interested in something. It's just like you're just intrinsically interested in it. And so that's what it was.
So after you talked to, I guess this guy who tells you like study something that you could grow in and actually develop a skill. Like, did you just apply?
I just like went in kinesiology, and then I'm a guy that likes to like be informed on any decision that I make, and so I just like ask, what is this about? Like, what can you do? What careers? And I remember meeting a professor who was super real with me. He's like, there is no career in exercise science, like specifically in exercise science. It's
at
like
Long Beach.
At Long Beach. And so he was just like, it's what you do with the knowledge that you have. Whether you go into physical therapy or occupational therapy, you want to be a strength coach, a fitness, specialist, or an athletic trainer, whatever it may be. That's up to you. But as far as an undergrad degree in exercise science, there's no career attached to that, right? And so I was like, But he says, if it's an interest in you're passionate about, you can take it to wherever you want, And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I pursued it, and I really loved it. A lot of guys would.
What did you love about it?
It's just, how I said, like, when I was like lifting weights and into fitness and all that, I always had these questions of like, why, And that's where it started. Like, why is my body changing like this? Or how is my body changing like this?
And these studies and these researchers found out like the answer.
Yeah, they have it. And some of it's textbook information. Just like open up an exercise physiology textbook and read about it. And I would actually do that. Yeah. Like super nerd alert, right? Like just like reading a textbook where everyone's reading like Harry Potter and all this. I'm reading like a exercise physiology textbook. And I was just like, whoa. And a lot of the stuff I didn't understand. And again, Google just came out. Like there was like Yahoo, Google, whatever, it's these search engines. There's not a lot of content. There's no Wikipedia, none of this. So I just had to like figure it out and ask professors questions. So I was always that guy.
Did you go down like rabbit holes during like this experience? Because like for me, I guess working out as a trainer or something, if I have a client that has like carpal tunnel or like just something that they like need to like figure out, I'll do my research specific to that case. But then once I found my answer, I'm just like, that's it. Like I don't go further. Yeah. Like I'm not motivated to go further. I'm just like, I found my answer and that's it. Yeah. Like for you, was it like I found my answer and then I'm gonna go even deeper?
Yeah. So I'm like that.
Okay.
And
I feel like it's a great trait,
this kind of ties into
I feel like that's a great trait.
Yeah, and this ties into my journey, like the inspiration to become a professor and a researcher. And so it's just like that constant questioning. Yeah, I would always even question like my professors too. Like, where did you get this information from? Like, I'll say that. And
you were that serious.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were annoyed by me, but I just was so inquisitive.
What would they do to? What would they respond to? Because like I have one of my uncles. He's a nurse practitioner. Right? Yeah. And he went to Davis, I believe, and he was a very smart like college student. But he always questioned his professors. Yeah. And like one day, like the professor just like failed him or gave him a D. Gave him a D because he didn't take the final because my uncle thought that his professor was wrong.
Oh, okay.
So like if he failed, he could retake the class with someone else, but the professor gave him a D, and therefore that grade you can't retake it. Yeah. And therefore he didn't get into like a medical school because of that grade. Yeah. And that professor did that to him. Wow. Right. And so like that's super petty in my opinion. Yeah. Like what would these professors respond to you when you would, I guess, question their theories and beliefs? Yeah.
Well, like in hindsight, like I guess I can see how I may have come off like disrespectful. Sure. But in reality, I was just super inquisitive. And, me being in the position I'm in now as a professor, I would love a student like how I was to just ask questions. But to answer your question, like, there were definitely professors who just like shunned me, like just avoided me. Right. Like, oh shit, here's that Eddie kid. Like he's gonna ask me a gazillion questions and question everything I say. Yeah. And I'm sure I was annoying to some of the professors as well. But there were professors who would like implore these type of questions. They would encourage me to continue. And every time I'll leave their office, it's like, hey, Eddie, you keep asking these questions. And they're not egotistical to the point where they're like I know everything, so you just come to me. Yeah. It was more like, I might not have all the answers for you, but we can make a discussion out of it. And that's what's going to strengthen you as an individual. And so I remember just sitting in, he's retired now, but my exercise physiology professor, there's two exercise physiology professors, and I ended up having to take this one guy that I didn't want because my schedule just didn't allow me to take the other guy. Sure. But I always went to the other guy's office and just asked a bunch of questions. And he was that guy that was not egotistical, and maybe because he was an older guy, he was just more like, maybe he saw like a little bit of him in me, and so I was just asking him a bunch of questions, and I learned actually a lot more just through those conversations than I did in the classroom.
So after that, like now you graduated. So like you get your kinesiology degree, right? You go through this process, like, and what inspires you to be a professor? Dude?
Right. So even at this point,
are
that's
you still personal training at this time?
Yeah. So at this point,
so you have clients somewhere.
Yeah, like
Are you still at LA Fitness?
No. So this is what happened. So at this point, even throughout my entire undergrad, which took like 4.5 years. Okay. Being a professor.
4.5. What was the extra half, bro?
I might have like taken classes I didn't need or something, and I just like screwed up my.
You just love learning, and you're like, I'm gonna take more classes than I need to. Okay.
And in hindsight, they were like, it was such a waste of money, but like whatever.
Well, it's a state school; it's not that expensive,
I know,
right?
But still, back then it was like $800 to just go to school for a whole year. Yeah, it was
crazy the prices now, dude?
Yeah, it's like I don't even look it up, but it's gone like quite a bit since then. But yeah, what was I saying? I was just, even throughout my entire undergrad, I didn't have any thoughts of becoming a professor at all. And the reason being is because while I was going to school, like starting, I think I was 18 going to 19, I was using, and I'm not saying like you should do this, but you can kind of understand like where my mindset was. It was like, I understood like LA Fitness was taking a huge chunk of the fees that these clients were paying for personal training.
What was the rates back then?
Oh man, I would say probably like $80 to $100 per session.
Really?
And these were like
for LA Fitness?
Yeah, it's still expensive to this day. So I would say I remember it being like $100. I remember that number because I was just like, man, I'm barely getting paid like $15. $80
to $90 bucks? I don't know. Really? LA Fitness does that?
Yeah, it was like really expensive. And I remember I was only getting like $15 for that session, which was like an hour. And I was like, dang, this is like robbery. This is robbery, right? And I was young, but I wasn't that young. I'm a grown man, at this point. And so I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I not making, I'll charge them $50, $60.
Sure.
And they'll save money. So I was like, how do I do this? I'm not going to be shady and trying to train people under the table at the place I'm working at. So I started researching. I was like, holy crap, there's a bunch of these small like boutique gyms that just rent space out.
Yeah.
And I
They're
remember,
all over.
yeah, there's one just down the street. And I was like, I'm getting a lot of clients because, you know, that was my only job at the time. I went to school in the morning and then trained all day after that. And
you
then
probably know more than most trainers at this time because like you're just like diving yourself into it.
Yeah.
It's what you're studying in college.
Yeah. You know, I was understanding the human body better. I was still limited in terms of how to apply that knowledge because it was so science based. And so, but through experiences, I could tell I was getting better because I was just more like knowledgeable and just like the science. And so, but I still had a lot more room to grow. At this point, though, the training was more so like one aspect was like, I'm going to school because I want to be a better trainer and I want to serve these clients who are paying a lot of money, like as best as I possibly can. And that showed because I started gaining a lot of interest from a lot of people.
Did you have a pretty big roster at the time?
Yeah, and I was even like backed up where I had to like just people were on a waiting list. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's because I was just like working really hard. And I think another aspect was I was very like I was really, I don't want to say good at it, but I just like talking to people. So some of these clients who are already vulnerable because they feel like they're out of shape or whatever, or they have some issue with just like how their body is or their health is, they would open up to me and I would love to just like converse with them. I remember just like after sessions, we would just be in the parking lot just chatting for like an hour. And I think that was also part of it. But
I feel like a lot of trainers don't understand that like being like a good friend is like just as important as the knowledge that you have, because like people work with people who they know, like, and trust. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you could build that trust in like that first 3 session like package that you have, like they could be potential like lifetime clients if you decide to do that.
100%. And so I would say like a majority of my clients at that time, they were all mostly weight loss, you know, focused, but a lot of times they just wanted someone to just talk to and relate with them and just, you know, just like be able to like vent out their frustrations. And then there was the workout, right? And so I think that was a big part of it. And so, but yeah, I was just like, all these clients like wanted to work with me.
How many sessions were you having at this time?
Oh man, I would
like a week.
Let's see. I remember going to school, like my classes would start like sometimes 8 or 9, and then I would go take like 3 classes. So I'll probably end around like early afternoon.
Okay.
And then so maybe from like 2 o'clock to like 10 p.m. I would just train.
Every day?
Like almost every day. Yeah, I was busy, man.
That's wild.
Yeah, dude. And then there was one point where I was like, this is too much. And so I just like trained like every other day. And then I would take on like just random jobs. Like I remember like downtown Disney, there was this restaurant, my buddy was working there as a waiter. He was like, hey, Eddie, why don't you just work like once a week here and you get like free access to Disneyland? And I was like,
that's
all right, so I would just do random stuff like that. And then I would just like, you know, just pick up random things. But yeah, training was the main thing.
What inspired you to train that much?
I think it was just a hustle, man.
Like, did you need the money at the time?
Money was, truthfully, money was like a thing. Like that's, factor. And I wasn't getting paid much. And that's what kind of led me to like, hey, I'm going to take these clients and just go down the street and pay this guy $20 to rent for 1 hour per client, right? So every time I use it, like I'll pay $20 an hour.
You charge in.
And I was charged the clients, like at that time, remember it was like $60 or $65.
So you're still not making that much. You're still making like 45.
Little. Yeah, and I felt like...
Which is twice as much as you're making.
Twice, and I saw it that way. I saw it relative to what I was making. And so, and it's just like the same amount of work, right? And then I got really like pumped, like, cause like all these people were coming with me and I was training there. And then like, I made like, you know, this is before social media. So I was making like these little like flyers. I'll just start putting it on like,
what was the feeling to like actually have people come to you and like help me, like, and you're getting all this traction, like, was it affirmation of like your interests are paying off, or like, what was it?
Yeah. You know, I'm always like, I'm my own worst critic, right? And I'm always like thinking in my head, and this has nothing to do with confidence. It's just more like my way of just having this mindset of I need to constantly improve. So I always never...
Where does that come from?
I don't know. It's like, it's...
family,
maybe family, you know, I don't know.
Immigrant background, maybe?
Maybe so. And so I always just kind of never thought I was a good trainer. Yeah, I just was just
why would you think that? Because like
I have no
objectively, you have the knowledge and you're talking to all these professors and you're having people asking to train with you.
Yeah, Nate, I would make up these excuses in my mind. Like, I think they just like me because I'm just personable. Like, I would just say this, and it came from no feedback or anything. It's just, I was in my head. And, you know, I think that could be viewed as a bad thing for a lot of people. But at a young age, I think that's a good thing because you're not like creating this, like, I've reached this ceiling of knowledge and skill as a trainer or whatever profession you're pursuing. It's more like, because I feel so inadequate, I'm constantly trying to be better. And that kind of carried on into how diligent I was in school, you know, to learn more, because I just never felt adequate, you know? Wow. And I would look up to these other trainers that I was working with in that same little studio. And I was like, man, I got to get to that level. And people were like,
what were they doing different that
I don't know. Like, that's the thing. It's just like, maybe they had this presence or the way they talk. And I was like, I got to get to that level. And people were like, I think you guys are kind of doing the same thing, like, you know, and I was just...
But, like, what would they do that you'd be like, yo, that's inspiring, like, I want to do that?
You know, this sounds stupid, but I think it's just their physical presence. They just look like they just own the place, you know? So I was like, I got to be like that, and it was so stupid. I was just a young guy, like 18 at this time, 19, and so...
your body isn't fully developed then,
yeah,
so
yeah,
you can't
I was
put
still,
on that type of muscle.
I still had, like, baby fat, you know? And I was just like, man, I got to get ripped, and, you know, that was just a young mindset, but I knew that, like, I was driven. I would spend time putting flyers on cars, and I would just like, I remember like seeing the flyers on the floor because I would just toss them and I'll just pick it up, clean it, and then put it on.
Oh,
and
you're hustling.
Like Eddie Joe Fitness or something like that.
That's what you did? It's called Eddie Joe Fitness at the time?
And I couldn't afford to, at that time, like, to put even my picture on the thing. It was just like my phone number and stuff. And but a lot of my clients came from referrals, which to me gave me the most affirmation because it's just like this client that I served and helped out thought it would be thought I was worthy enough to help their friend or family. And so I really thought that was like really affirming for me at the time and really motivating me. So yes, throughout my undergrad, I was just building this fitness business. And I would still like work a little bit at LA Fitness to kind of just get more exposure.
And this whole time that you were training, I mean, in college, you were thinking that you were going to be a full-time trainer after?
I thought I was just I had this thing of like, I kind of cringe at this, but I was thinking of like a name of a gym that I would open up one day.
What was the name?
It was called Beach Bodies. And oddly enough, ironically enough, it's one of like
one of the biggest fitness brands right now.
So I was like, oh, it's going to be a gym called Beach Bodies. It'll be focused on just training one-on-one. And, you know, at this time, it was just...
Did Beachbody not come out yet?
No, this is way before like even P90X and all that stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, but yeah, it went really well. And then I met a couple good guys who were just like trainers as well. And they were a lot older than me. And so they had their like master's degree already. And they were like in
kinesiology?
Exercise science. They were trainers and they were like doing pretty well. And they were like mid-30s or something. And now at this time I was like 19, maybe 20, maybe 19, 20. I was still young. And then I was saving a lot of money at this time. And so they asked me, would you be willing to go into business with us? We're going to open up a fitness studio, personal training studio. And at that time I was like, hell yeah. Like, what do you need? And so I've, you know, put as much capital as I can into the business.
So you did do it.
Yeah,
you did it.
I did. And then, you know, the majority owner, his name was on the,
and you're still in college at the time?
I'm still in college. And so I was like stressed because I was like going to college and doing this.
The clients and starting this business.
Yeah. And it was tough, but you know, I did it and then we opened it up. And I remember the hardest part was just finding a facility. So after school, I would
What percentage owner were you?
I think I was like 20 something, like 20. It was like an odd number. I remember like 23, or it just depended on how much I put in.
Sweet.
But I dumped all my like savings, pretty much all my savings into this. And then
like all of it,
like pretty much all of it. And then,
what, dude, that's ballsy.
Yeah.
Especially at that age.
And then, you know, I could say I was naive in a lot of areas too, but I'm also like, I think I've always been a risk taker. And so I just was like, let's just do it, you know, let's try it. And I trusted these guys and they were trustworthy guys for sure. And so I remember, and in hindsight, I was like, man, this was such a brilliant idea. And I don't want to take all the credit. It was just like us three. It was three partners.
Okay. And were you guys the only three trainers?
Only three trainers at the time. And then so we opened it up in a medical building.
What?
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's like a medical building and all the medical offices are on top,
Okay.
you know, and then on the bottom, there's always like a cafe, a coffee shop or whatever. There was like a pharmacy. Then there was like a dentistry.
Okay.
And then there was like a medical device store. So the dentists, like, they left and then they closed shop.
You turned a dentist studio
So we're
into
just
a
like,
fitness studio.
and then they cleaned it up. So it was just like one giant room.
Yeah.
And we're just like, man, it's small, but I feel like we
What's
have
the square footage, you think?
Dude, I can't even tell you. I was probably say like, definitely over 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not super small.
It's not super small.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not 2,000, over 1,000.
Okay.
So
That's
it's like,
relatively small.
it wasn't super small, but just enough for 3 traders to like run a business. And our idea was like, one of our clients was one of the health educators in this building. She was working with like, she was a registered dietitian. She was like teaching classes to like diabetics or, you know, any of the patients who on like nutrition and exercise. And so the way we got connected was she invited me, she was my client. She invited me to do like a little fitness seminar for her patients. Okay. So I did that. And then that's how we found out about this like space. And she's like, you know what, if you guys get this space, we can make a deal where we will funnel you guys clients, right? Through like the health education courses.
That's smart.
So we would do free seminars on fitness and we'll just like have these like, they're mostly older individuals, like do exercises and stuff. And then we'll then promote our business. And we say, it's just downstairs. Yeah. And then they'll come down like, wow, this is great. We had like a few dumbbells, like a multi-machine, one of those multi-exercise machines. And
did you guys buy a ton of equipment?
No, at that time we just
what did you guys have?
We just had like dumbbells. We had like bands. We didn't even have we didn't even have a barbell.
You didn't have a barbell?
We had to do what we can because we were just like, we had limited capital, right? Yeah. It's not like we had investors coming in and stuff. So, but we decided, hey, we need to get like this multi-cable machine so we can be a little bit more versatile within a small space. So yeah, we worked out of that thing, and I still had to like take some clients to that previous place.
And what year were you in college?
Now this is kind of going into my sophomore to junior year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're still pretty young at the time.
Yeah, I'm still young. I'm hustling and like. So yeah, it was fun, man. But it was tough, bro. Okay. Like I ain't gonna lie, it was like one of the, you know, I think now I could handle it a lot more, but at that time when I was like 19, 20, it was just like really, really hard, you know. And
what happened to the business?
Okay, so what happened was, you know, it started getting bigger and bigger, and then I started getting more interested in strength and conditioning, working with athletes, because like I shared, I was always into sports, right?
Because right now you're working with like people who are just like
weight loss, diabetics and stuff, which was great. I learned a lot.
It's a good foundation.
Great foundation, but as I was going to school, I remember taking a strength and conditioning course, the science of strength and conditioning. I'm like, man, it's so different. Working with athletes versus just general population, it's so different.
How so?
Because their focus is different. Like for example, an athlete maybe focus on speed. So your training program needs to be focused on speed. So if you're lifting heavy all the time, you're going to make them slow. Or if you're putting them on like I'm just going to burn as many calories as I can kind of thing, they may be better conditioned, but they're not developing speed or whatever, power and all that stuff. So I was like, you know what? I love the science behind training athletes. I remember taking a lecture about just speed development. I was like blown away.
Like sprints and stuff.
Yeah. Like what is the science? What is the mechanism, like physiological mechanism that makes someone stronger or faster and more explosive? And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Right. And so, but my space that we had was too small to train athletes. Yeah. And so there was another warehouse, and it kind of looks like what is now like, you know how CrossFit gyms are? It's like just big warehouse.
Big warehouse space,
yeah, turf and all that. I found this one in Anaheim, and they were also renting out space. College. Yeah, they were renting out space. And so they're like, if you want to train athletes, pay us $20 or something an hour. And I would train these athletes.
Did you ditch the other place?
No, I still was doing like half an hour. So I never rested. I was just like doing this, right? And so like I'll go to school, and sometimes I would have to ditch because I had like clients, you know, and you know, I don't regret it, but you know, I would go to the business, train a few clients there, and then I was very transparent with my partners. And I went to this warehouse in Anaheim. So I went from Whittier to Anaheim, which was not an easy drive. No, and then I would always do group training. So I would have like 5 kids
at for the athletic
Athletes,
training.
yeah.
You did group training only.
Yeah, and I realized, again, turning on the business side of me, I was like, this is much more lucrative because these parents of these kids are crazy in terms of how much they would spend on their kids.
It's crazy how much they would pay.
Yeah,
compared
I
to
was just like,
training.
they're like, how much? And I was like, 200 an hour. I just like made it up.
You said it.
I just made it up, and they're like, oh, okay.
Did you say 200?
Yeah, I remember 200 was.
You said 200 an hour.
Because I was talking to some of the other guys. They're like, yeah, these parents pay a lot. And so parents put these kids in soccer.
So you would train 5 kids maybe, and 200 a pop per hour.
Yeah,
you're making 1,000 an hour.
So you can see why I was just like,
what?
I know I had this business, but
bro, that's
like,
wild.
You know, I'd rather pay this facility $20 an hour and just bank in like all this profit.
Yeah.
And I realized these parents are so obsessed with their kids like excelling in sports, and I just remember like putting them in little league, youth soccer, football, whatever. They would pay so much money, and in addition to that, they would want they see the potential of their kid.
Sure.
And then they're going into high school, like Modern Day, like Servite, like Orange Lutheran, all these big like sports programs in high school around the area. And they're private. A lot of them are private schools, so these parents are like, you know, well off.
Sure.
Man, they would pay a lot of money for their kids, and they love the fact that I would take like one kid and they're like 4 of their friends who are all like, say, wide receivers or like DBs and something, and I would just create these programs like, this is going to be a 2-month speed development program. So it made it easier for me because I wasn't worried about like creating a whole off-season program for that. I was just focused on developing speed. So I'll take the things I learned in school and then keep asking, you know, different strength coaches some questions on some ideas on how to do certain things. And I would just focus like on a 1 to 2 month program developing speed and explosiveness. And each time they train like maybe 3 times a week, I would get paid $200 for each of those sessions. And so that was when I was like really turning on that whole
business mindset.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to
Where did you come up with that price? Because like you're making 40.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you say 200.
Yeah.
Like that's ballsy too.
So by that time, by the time we opened up the business, I was definitely charging a lot more, you know? And so, you know, it was a business, so I wasn't paying anyone rent, and I was just like, the cost of overhead was just kind of baked in. And so, I was making, you know, a lot more, but not 200 an hour. And so, the reason I came up with 200 was because a random parent was just talking to me. And then I was connected to his son through like another person's friend or whatever. And then like, what do you do? And I was like, oh, I own this business, blah, blah, blah. I'm studying exercise science, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, do you train athletes? I was like, sure, I do. And then I was like, you know, there's a spot that I can, I know that I can train athletes. There's like a big enough space. And I was caught off guard. He's like, so like, what do you charge? And I was like, I didn't know what to say, but I just like blurted out 200. And I just blurted it out.
And they just said, yeah.
They're like, oh, okay, cool. And I was just like, holy shit, I should have said like 300 or 400 or something like that. But I was like 200. It was not calculated. I didn't calculate like overhead, or which there really was none. It was just gas and the rental fee.
Sure.
But I just said 200, just blurted it out. And he was like, oh, great. And then I was like, and, you know, I do like incentives, like, hey, if you refer these many athletes, I'll just start giving you more discount. And, you know, a lot of these parents knew I was young, and I think they kind of like knew like I was a hustler. Like, no, I'll pay you whatever, you know, you charge. I don't need no discount, you know? And I was just like, that's when I learned like, hey, I got to like, my price tag is my value. And maybe that's why I blurred out 200, because in my mind, I thought I'm worth $200, you know? And so, but sure enough, it was kind of like the, a little bit above average price.
I guess what's your advice to like, I guess trainers out there who are afraid to say a higher price because they're afraid of someone not wanting to train with them?
Yeah, so it's a weird psychology, right? So it's just like if you put your price high, right? The first thought is either, wow, they're too expensive, but the second thought, or sometimes the first thought, would be like, this guy must be good, or he must be wanted, right? So if you do truly believe you are worth that much, and of course you need to be able to back it up too, right? You can't just be like uneducated, no certifications, no education in terms of like how to go about training people, no experience. You can't be charging all that. But at the same time, if you feel like you can and you're valued that much, then stick to it, right? And if they don't want to work with you, that's fine. And this is like a number one business rule. It's just like, put your price tag there and stick to it, because that shows that this is what you believe is your value, right?
That's ironic to what you said before, because like you said that you looked up to these other trainers and you didn't feel like you were good enough.
I know, right?
Right? So you built up some confidence.
You can kind of tell, like,
time.
You can tell, like, me telling this journey, like, you can see the maturation, right? You can see like how my mindset is changing, and I'm just learning as I go. And so I think,
did you ever have people who like turned down that price, or like, oh, that's too expensive?
Oh yeah, a lot, a lot, especially, especially like athletes coming from, schools, like high school programs that are not in the most like affluent neighborhoods. So my target population was those private schools, the big football programs, really. Modern Day was like the number one.
How was seeing like you would make the speed program for like two months, right? And like you would do your research on it and you would study it and then you would implement it to these kids, right? And you seeing them do that and the result being like 5 seconds faster, 3 seconds faster.
Yeah.
Like that's super cool. But like what happens if it's the other case? Like it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, did you ever have that happen?
So here's the thing, and maybe this is a piece of advice for young strength coaches or trainers.
Yeah.
The reason why working with youth is so great is because it's easier to get results in youth who are like super untrained. They don't have this type, they've never experienced this type of exercise stress. So they're going to adapt to these stresses pretty, I don't say easily, but more effectively. Right. And so I learned that through my experience that like, man, these kids, they're just going to get faster because they've never done this type of training before. And the thing is, like, my program,
so your success rate is probably like close to 100%.
It was pretty high, to be honest. Yeah. And so, because they never trained this way before, like they don't do speed training,
probably,
and they're hungry and they're motivated. So of course they're going to get faster, even if it's just a little bit. But at the most part, if we don't quantify their speed or any, like, because I didn't have like tools to like measure a lot other than like a stopwatch. We didn't have like timing gates and stuff, but
it's not like your research where you analyze everything.
I know, but they're like, they feel explosive, they feel faster, and their parents are looking at them, obviously subjectively, like they got like faster and more explosive than, I would say, like almost 100% of them, because they were kids,
Awesome.
Some are coming out of middle school, some are freshmen, some are like sophomores. And so I realized this is my target, man. Like if I'm working with like collegiate athletes who've been trained, it's going to be a lot harder for me to get them faster, because sometimes they've reached their peak.
And sometimes it's like 0.25 of a second.
Right. But I will say that sort of made me thirstier for knowledge, because I wanted to know what are those intricate things that I needed to know to like train someone who is very well trained, like a collegiate athlete or even a professional athlete. How do I get them faster? Because obviously the programs needs to be very, very tailored towards like their particular circumstances of being like well trained, and they're just already monsters, right? But these kids, like, honestly, I don't even think my program was special. Like I just made them do explosive stuff all the time. They just came faster because they just never were exposed to that before.
Then your business model kind of just was like very awesome.
And the thing is, it's the same idea as like anybody like who wants to get jacked, right? Like someone who's already jacked, they're not going to see like much more gains in a certain period of time versus someone who's
like 90 days. Is like where you see like most of the growth.
Exactly. Versus someone who's never trained in their lives, So it's the same idea. So, and that I learned from school, like the rate of adaptation, the rate of change. And so I was just like, man, the kids, everyone wants to work with professional athletes and college players and all that. But I was like, kids
is where it's at.
Youth is where it's at. This is where your business can boom, because they're going to see changes, positive changes.
But you're also working with like weight loss, older people over
weight
here.
loss and older people. And I realized over time, like,
did you ditch it?
No. I was still doing it, but I realized over time, this is like a majority of their success is their dietary behaviors need to change. And so I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian, but I would have to motivate them to just eat less, basically, because they're eating so much quantity of food. I would have to just more so not give them a dietary program, because that would be out of scope of practice.
Yeah, you're technically not allowed to do that.
I would motivate them to just not eat as much. And, you can...
How would you do that?
Oh, man, I use like so many methods. Like,
at this point, it's psychology, kind of.
Yeah, it was just more like, this is how you got to this point. So just using basic logic, you just do the opposite, right? And I would just reinforce this over and over and over again as like you have a battle, you have this like battle with food, like unhealthy eating. And that's where you got to this point. And I'm generalizing here, but yeah, for the most part, that was sort of the case. And so I'll use whatever random methods that if I majored in a field that allows me to sort of like better understand the psychology of like, you know, unhealthy eating and stuff, then I'd probably be better at it. But I wasn't. I just kind of just sort of like listen to them and see, like, I'll ask them the questions like, you know, when do you eat the most, or when do you go on this crazy binge eating spree, or you know, stuff like that. And they'll usually say like stress or like marital issues or I don't know, whatever. And so then we'll like kind of start talking about those things and see if there's a way we can like have them cope with it without food, you know? And so, you know, I was definitely not very well trained in that aspect, but you know, all I knew was I can give them a great workout. And I'll be real with them. I was just like, hey, look, we're only burning about these many calories per session.
But you're eating twice.
And you're
right
eating
after.
And we'll burn this many calories twice a week. And then every other day you're not doing anything. So you're basically out of all the hours out of the week, you're only spending pretty much 2 hours, like burning excess amount of calories. So you think that's going to make...
That's a good way to put it.
I was like, you think that's going to make a dent? And they're just like...
Oh, you would ask them
yeah,
that.
and
That's a smart
like,
way to do it.
no. So I was like, what do you need to do then? Every day you have to create some kind of deficit in terms of your caloric intake.
And or moving.
Yeah, so you either have to burn more calories or eat less calories. So why don't you do both? So I'm going to give you homework. So on the days we don't train, they would have to do something, right? And then it sucked, but I would have to like call them just to make sure they're doing it. And I don't even know if they were doing it or not. They're probably like sitting at a restaurant, like breathing heavy, like, I'm like, I'm at the park, like going for that jog that you told me to do. And I was just like, are you sure?
Why do you think clients lie to you? Because like I'll give like a client of mine like homework to do like 100 kettlebell swings just on the days we don't train. I was like, hey, it takes less than 5 minutes. It'll get your heart rate up. It works your whole posterior train. Like, it's a great movement for you. And and like they'll be like, yeah, I did it. And then like like a family member would be like, text me like, he didn't do it. You know?
You know, I know, right? It's like, I think a part of it was, I didn't always think they were lying, but yes, I would pick up on stuff like that. And I think it's because like we built a relationship to this point where they don't want to disappoint you. Okay. You know, and I'm just like, you're the one paying me money though. Yeah. So
it's a disservice to yourself.
It's a disservice to yourself. And so you know, I'm giving you the services that you know, is commensurate with how much you pay me. Yeah. And this means homework. It means like being accountable and all that. So if you lie to me, it just doesn't do anything. So just be honest. And you know, I remember having talks like that with a few clients, and you know, they would just come to terms. And it's just like, it's sometimes hard because I'm like, in their eyes, a kid, because they're like 60 sometimes, 70 sometimes, like maybe 50s or whatever. Like, you know, it's kind of hard to listen to some kid like tell them all this stuff about like, you know. So those are like some of the hurdles I definitely remember having to.
You're kind of an expert in this area too.
What is that?
I mean,
yes, yeah. Like, and I think they respected that. But when I got into some like sort of like life talks about like how to like, you know, motivate yourself and stuff, they're just like, I could tell they're looking at me like, who the hell is this kid?
I know.
What life did you live up to this point where you feel like you could talk to me about how to motivate and how to like live my life? And I was just like, I felt silly at times, but that's my job, you know? Yeah.
Why do you think people have so much problems with food, especially in like America, dude? Because like these binge eatings, these just like junk food, like that is so addictive. Like there's most of the population, I would say, eats bad food.
Right. And I think, so, you know, obviously I'm not an expert in this area, but if I had to speculate, I think it's largely driven by, and this may be controversial, but it may be driven by, you know, big corporations, because obviously, you know, in our economy, in our country, it's a lot of things are controlled, like behaviors are controlled by people who want to make profit. So, you know, we're like pushing like food, like eating, right? Whether it's fast food, whether it's like processed foods, canned foods, whatever it may be. Like we built this culture of eating in this country, and it's also the same in other countries as well. But I think like a lot of this, like a lot of the advertisements, a lot of like the corporate, you know, messages is like eat. You know, eating is good, eating is great, which it is. Yeah. But also eating like eating to the point of excess can also be damaging to the body as well. But so that's part of it, right? So we're always exposed to this, like this sort of this
stimulus
message, this stimulus of like eating this is great, eating this is delicious, like
Carl's Jr.
just
ads
eat,
of like hot girls with burgers.
Exactly. Like don't worry about like what other people think, and just like live your life, be happy. And then a part of it is also like, I think food addiction is a very real thing, you know, and so I think food addiction is also generational. And
really?
So, and so
how so?
Because the eating habits of a child is really, really controlled by their parents, and how you eat as a child carries on. And, you know, there's times of, obviously there's many situations where as they mature through life, they make decisions on their eating habits themselves. Right. But I do feel that they've, you know, we don't argue the fact that the things that we're exposed to as a child does carry on into our adulthood. And I think one of those things is just, you know, the eating habits and your views on food. And so I think that also has a lot to do with it as well.
How do I guess like parents then like become educated in proper eating? Because if you said it's a generational thing, it won't change unless someone has like some knowledge or new knowledge of to change.
You know, that's a very good question, because there are actually studies that examine this. Not specifically my field, but I do read upon these studies, these peer-reviewed articles, where researchers have collected data on this, where, you know, there's some shifts that are going on within the modern generations, and that because of social media, because of the internet and the way it is right now, and how information is more accessible, just like information regarding like food, right? Healthy eating and unhealthy eating and these things, like the current generations are much more exposed to this information. So they are, whether intentionally or inadvertently, they're becoming educated on stuff like this. And so there is this shift, and I think it may manifest
for the better.
For the better. And I think it may manifest in years to come in like healthier people.
We got hope, guys. We got hope.
Hopefully. Because the obesity rate is pretty ridiculous in this country, you know, and so.
But also we're in like a field too that like it promotes like good eating, good health and all this stuff. And like, I would say most of my friends in the fitness industry, like they educate like their people and their families. And if we just continue to do that for a long enough period of time, it should be better.
Yeah. And to be honest, like, you know, if I think about like my parents' generation, the generation before that, like they didn't have access to all this education on medicine and health and fitness and all that and healthy eating. But it's also baked into the culture. You have to eat. You know, that's how you get stronger. But in reality, it's how you get unhealthy, you know? And so, you know, even my parents nowadays, like even with access to this information, like they're still stuck in their ways. So you can see how that is like generational. And so I'm very fortunate to have the luxury of education and having access to this information, because
you might be
if
been the same.
I could have been morbidly obese, because my parents, when we were raised, like you should have seen how I ate when I was a kid. You know, I just ate everything. There was no restrictions, and like, fries, that's potatoes. That's good for you, Eddie. And I'm like, okay. And I was just eating a bunch of fries, you know. They didn't know what you know, corn syrup was, and they didn't know what all that stuff was. And so, you know, that's no one's fault. It's just they didn't have access to that knowledge. And so
what's your response to, I guess, people who say like, I'm obese because it's genetic, you know, and I'm unhealthy because it's genetic, like all these things. Like, what do you say to that?
I do believe there is merit in that, except that they don't know for sure, because you would have to like somehow objectively know that, hey, this is hereditary, right? There has to be some testing done. There are research that show there are these like obese genes, and how your genes are expressed in your DNA can make it more conducive to becoming obese for certain individuals. That can be inherited, right? So there is some merit for that, but I do think most people say that without having that knowledge. They're just saying that because it makes sense for them, right?
It's like a cop-out.
It could be a cop-out, but I do understand why they're saying that, because they see like their parents and their parents' parents and so forth, and they see like, you know, obesity is pretty, you know, common within their lineage. But yeah, there's research that shows that obesity, or the propensity to become obese, can be inherited, and it goes down to the genetic factors. And so that's what I studied as a PhD student was obesity. And so, yes, there are genetic factors.
It's just not 100% true.
That can contribute.
And most of the time it's not true.
I want to say most of the time. I think I will say this: when people do say it's hereditary, I'm obese because it's just in our family line. I think they say it mostly as a way to justify their status as obese and their eating habits and so forth. I don't think they say it because they went to the doctors or they went into some research lab and tested their DNA and identified certain expressions of genes that show, hey, based on this research and this data, it shows that, hey, this gene, this particular gene and the way it's expressed in your body is one of the factors that has contributed to your state of obesity. They don't do that. Right? No one does, right? And so I do believe like the whole, I'm obese because of genetics. I think that's really just their own way of justifying without really truly knowing if it is. But even with like genetics, even with, these so-called obesity genes, and you carry those genes, and it's not really carrying those genes, it's just how those genes are expressed within your body, within your DNA. Even with that, it doesn't mean you're like going to be obese and that's it. Like there's other factors that influence how you look, how your health is, and that's all external factors like your physical activity levels, your dietary behaviors, and all that. And so stress levels, even how you cope with stress, your lifestyle, those are all factors that play a role. So even if you did have this so-called obesity gene, there are other factors that are well within your control that can prevent it and treat it. Right. And so
for diet wise, like it's very controversial these days. It's like carnivore is the perfect diet. Veganism is the perfect diet. Intermittent fasting is the perfect diet. Vegetarianism is the perfect diet. So like, is there a perfect diet?
So it's all context, right? And I teach this to my students. It's like, what do you mean by perfect diet, or does this diet quote unquote work or doesn't work? Like in what context? If you're talking about weight loss,
all diets should work, right?
All diets should work. And there's no one diet that's inherently superior than any other diet because of the fundamentals of weight loss, of body mass changes.
From what I understand, like all these diets tend to like just at the end of the day, get less calories.
Exactly.
And if it's like carnivore, it's like you take away all the carbs and like you can't necessarily eat a ton of meat and you'll just be full. Like you don't, like you just can't eat more carbs. And then I guess for like vegetarians, like they can't eat protein or carbs, and therefore like your calories are less. Intermittent fasting, like if you wait until 4 p.m. to eat every day, like 2/3 of the day is already done and you only have this time, like you're gonna probably eat less calories.
Honestly, if your weight stable caloric intake on average is like, let's just say 3,000 calories per day, that's what keeps you at whatever weight you're at, and you just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna eat one Big Mac a day, you're gonna lose weight. But it's considered unhealthy by most, right? So in the context of weight loss,
would you say that's unhealthy?
I would say it's unhealthy in the context of like you're not getting like
proper
a good
nutrients.
amount of nutrients within your diet. So you might be lacking a lot of things. Vitamins, minerals, your macronutrients and so forth. But in terms of weight loss, sure, it will work. Probably not the most prudent way to go about it, but go eat a Big Mac every day. You'll probably lose weight until you weight stabilize at whatever calories that Big Mac gives you every day. And so I do speak on that a lot because it's society is very black and white, like what works and what doesn't work. It's all about context, right? What is the focus of this dietary modification? And so, most people talk about diet in the context of weight loss because obesity and weight gain is such a prevalent issue in America, especially, or just globally, actually. But so when they asked me, like, does it work? Like, does intermittent fasting work? And I was like, work in what sense? Like, to lose body fat, to lose weight? And I was like, depends. If you do if your weight stable caloric intake is 3,000 calories per day, and during your eating periods, you're doing intermittent fasting, during your eating periods, you're eating 3,000 calories per day, you're probably not going to lose any weight. So really what I'm alluding to is the fact that you need to be in a caloric deficit, and we can go into a lot of the science of that, but calories is just a quantification of energy. and energy comes from fuel sources. And for the human body, our fuel sources are carbohydrates, fats, and amino acids / protein, right? And so if you overfuel, your body's not going to be like, no, we have enough fuel, like we don't need it. It's in your body, right? It's absorbed through your digestive system, and it's going to figure out a way to hold on to it for the sake of survival, because in biology, everything is predicated on survival of the organism. So fuel, if we don't have fuel for our body, we die, right? So if there's excess fuel, more than your body actually needs, meaning excess energy / excess calories, your body's going to figure out to put it somewhere, store it long term, and that's it's usually majority it's in fat cells, adipose cells. So that's why we get big.
That being said, though, like, do you ever recommend diets then, or no?
So the thing I recommend to people who do seek my, so I don't do training anymore. I don't like, but I do talk a lot about, I do talk to a lot of people about, diet, because I studied it. And so, I'd say this. Here is the fundamentals of weight loss, okay? Stop overfueling yourself, right? Or stop putting as much fuel in your body. And when I say fuel, it's nutrients, food, right? Stop putting the same amount of fuel that is needed to keep you at, say, 200 pounds, right? Let's just say that, right? Whatever amount of fuel quantified by calories that keeps you at 200 pounds. So I don't care if it's intermittent fasting. I don't care if it's a ketogenic diet. I don't care if it's like a carnivore diet. I don't care if it's a vegan diet. I don't care, okay? Because your focus is weight loss, right? Just figure out the best strategy for yourself to stop eating that much fuel / calories, right? Figure out the best way for yourself.
How do they find it?
They experiment, right? And so some people hate intermittent fasting. I've gotten used to intermittent fasting, so I just do it, right? And it's actually like works really well with my my work schedule and just my busy day.
Eating takes time.
It does take time. It doesn't mean I don't like eating. It's just like when I do eat, like I enjoy it, right? And so, but it doesn't work for people, right? And so I say experiment. Here are some popularized diets, or just eat whatever you normally eat, but just eat less of it, right? Yeah. And usually that's the way to go. And so, and I always say, like, don't cut out like just a little bit, because we're talking about averages here, right? It's not like you eat the same thing every single day. We kind of have to look at averages. So it's important for you to track what you eat on a average basis. So every week, take a daily, configure a daily average, right? And say like, the best way to do tracking is if you eat the same thing every day, though. It would be the easiest, right? But most people don't. So, they don't factor in the fact that the weekend they just ate like 6,000 calories, like beer, like alcohol, like nachos and all that stuff, where they don't usually do that Monday through Thursday or Friday or whatever. So you have to factor all that in, because that counts, right? So obviously we have nice apps to help you do that kind of stuff. And at the same time, you have to see what your weight is at. So if their weight stable for like weeks and they track their calories for those weeks, we see this many calories equates to keeping you at this weight, right? Meaning there's no excess of fuel coming in and there's no deficit of fuel, right? So whatever's stored in your body just stays there, right? And you're just utilizing the fuel that comes in every day, right? So say you're like 200 pounds and like you eat 3,000 calories and keeps you at 200 pounds, right? So we start from there. How can we turn that 2,000? How do we create a deficit from there? And I say, just go over. It might, to you, like, oh my God, I'm like totally starving. Not really, right? So just go over, because at the end of the day, you're going to have times of failure. You're going to like go nuts on a weekend, or you do social eating and stuff. So just, I say like, just go beyond what you think is like quote unquote normal for a deficit or restriction. What do you have advice for when people are hungry? Oh man, see, that's something that like I can't really give advice, because there's some people like, how could I sit here and say like, don't be hungry, or distract yourself with something, or just down some water, And I was just like, at the end of the day, like it's willpower, right? That's the end of the day, it's willpower. You can like drink tons of water to make yourself feel full, but at the end of the day, it's your willpower, And so for me, like there's times where I'm like, dude, it's like already late. I don't want to eat, especially because I had like a heavy eating weekend. I'll just like go to sleep. you know, you don't feel hungry when you're sleeping, so
Yeah,
I'll just go to sleep.
I did a 48-hour fast, and the hardest day, it's so hard falling asleep hungry.
Yeah.
Like, but once you're asleep, like, you're not hungry. Like, you're asleep.
I know.
But like getting there is the hard part.
Yeah. So yeah, I would have to like, you know, just be real with them. Just like, hey, you know, it's just about willpower at the end of the day.
Wow.
You know, you do whatever you want to keep you from being hungry.
That's such an easy answer that a lot of people will not like.
Yeah, because it doesn't give you a black and white answer, which I'm never about black and white answers. Yeah. And people hate that if you just don't want to think for themselves.
Well, it's not that too. Like, they're all theories technically, right? And at the end of the day, like, it could potentially be proven wrong one day. So you're like, it's right now, but there's a chance that it's wrong. Yeah. And I'm going to be open-minded to that.
Right. 100%. And so, moral of the story is I don't promote any one single diet. If it's about weight loss, it's just like, hey, here's the fundamentals of weight loss. You have to put in less fuel in your body so that your body can utilize the fuel that is already being stored. Yeah. So you have to manipulate your body in that sense. So figure out a way to do that. And I can help you with some strategies. That's it. Yeah.
So right now you're at this point where like you're training at both gyms. Like,
so going back,
you're absolutely busy. You're still taking these like classes like at school at Long Beach. You're only like second or third year.
Yeah.
How do you like, I guess like from that position, like what's the roadmap to, I guess, like a Dr. Eddie Joe?
Okay.
And like obviously you're not training and you're not at these gyms anymore. So
right. So, you know, I was doing the thing at the with the strength and conditioning with the athletes, and I was doing really well, and then the business, and then I decided after I graduated, and at this point I'm making pretty good money, and I was just like thinking, this is my life.
So you're still training once you graduate.
This is my career. I'm going to just continue to expand. And everything that was happening at the point was like pointing towards that fact. Like, this is going to be my career. I'm going to expand this into beach bodies or something one day, or whatever it's going to be. You know, I had all these like aspirations and goals in terms of business within the industry. And even like supplements, like supplementation, I started learning the business of that too. So I was thinking about getting into that as well.
That's kind of the most profitable part of training.
Yeah, it's like supplementation, and you know, there's an ugly side. I could talk to you about that later, but there's some ugly sides of the supplement industry as well. But at the end of the day, it's like a business that is definitely doable.
Well, the thing is, like with that, correct me if I'm wrong, like there's not a lot of regulations on supplements.
There is regulation, but they're not regulated like food and drugs.
Sure.
It's not, the FDA does not have stringent regulations on supplements as long as this product doesn't claim to treat or prevent any medical conditions. And so this law passed like in the 90s where supplement industry just like went crazy because of the looser regulations on it. And so with that being said, you can like hop onto like Alibaba, find a pre-made supplement that's made in some Chinese manufacturer.
Put your logo on it.
And you put your logo. It's a branding company. Yeah. So at that time I was like, I could be a branding company. I don't have the overhead to actually make my own supplement, or I'm sorry, the capital to make my own supplement, but I could surely brand it.
Because you have a brand at this point. Yeah, so people trust you.
Yeah, and I was thinking creatine, because creatine apparently is, at that time I found it was really cheap. And there's some controversies with that nowadays, but I'll, you know, if that topic comes up, I'll talk about it. But yeah, so that was just my whole mindset at the time. And then I decided to get a master's degree.
Before we move on real quick, are you a fan of supplements?
You know, it depends. Like, I would say, again, here's the whole...
I guess let me ask this. Do you take supplements?
I take only a couple supplements. Okay. And that is mostly just nutrients, protein, right? Just to get excess protein. Because I am doing intermittent fasting, so I do feel like it's hard to get the protein that I want just through food. And so, and to stay within my means in terms of caloric intake. And I do take... I've been experimenting with ginseng. And that's kind of... tea, but also just in pill form as well. And so
can you tell everyone like what ginseng is?
So ginseng is a root, right? So it's comes from Asian medicine, alternative medicine, but we don't classify it as medicine, even though like there are like traditional Eastern medicine medical professionals who would say it is medicine. But this kind of stemmed from like my upbringing, because I'm Korean, and ginseng is like a staple in Korean culture. It's claimed to have all these medicinal effects and stuff, which the research does show quote unquote medicinal effects, but it's not as potent as drugs. And so, because drugs are synthetic and you could just like beef it up, right? And so, but I read a lot of research, and you know, that's what I'm trained to do, is read research and look at scientific evidence. And there are a good amount of scientific evidence that show like health benefit properties of ginseng. And there's different types of ginseng, like red ginseng and stuff like that. And so, you know, my mom, she's a diabetic, type 2 diabetic, and she's been taking ginseng, and she's seen a lot of benefits in terms, and this is anecdotal, this is just her, but couple the anecdotal evidence with like scientific peer-reviewed evidence, then I'm just like, hey, we see like better control of blood sugar, better insulin modulation, better you know, control of preventative benefits in terms of heart disease and things of that sort. So, and there are some like performance benefits as well, you know. And so I was just like, you know, let me experiment with that. So, but I'm not like totally like dependent on it or anything like that. But
so you don't really think that supplements are necessary to?
It's not. That's why it's called supplement, right? It's to supplement
whatever you're doing.
And so, if you look at any research, scientific research, and you know, branding companies or supplement companies will never admit this, but if you actually look at the evidence, the effect that it produces, if it shows that there's some positive effect compared to like a placebo, the effects, practically speaking, are very, very small, like very small.
Including like fish oils or like lion's mane or like any of those.
The
vitamin
effects are very
B,
small.
Vitamin D.
It could be performance, like, or it could be like muscle mass gains, for example, or it could be like blood sugar reduction or better blood glucose control. It could be like, you know, controlling cholesterol. It could be whatever, right? Whatever they measured, their outcome measure is, whatever it may be, like say muscle mass. Like the effects of that supplement is very, very small, where it may not even be practically relevant, right? But branding companies, all they hear is, oh, it works.
It does work.
So they're going to be like,
it's small.
It's small, but they're not going to say that. So they like exaggerate these outcomes. And I see this a lot in the supplement industry. And I do a lot of consulting in the supplement industry as well.
It's so funny for like pre-workouts, you're reading the back. I was like, we'll make you bench press 50 pounds more than you're I was like,
I know.
That's kind of a bad guarantee.
And the sad part is you can make those claims. Like imagine like imagine like a pharmaceutical company putting those on their labels, like just these fabricated numbers. Like they would get sued like crazy.
100%.
Huge liability. But for supplement companies, for some reason, there's a lot, like very loose regulations on what you put out there. I mean, even if the data comes from some type of like research source, they could like manipulate it in a way where
that's crazy.
So
because I was 19 and I bought this like pre-workout as a Nitroflex pre-workout, and on the back it said that, and I was like, that's so awesome. I'm going to take this every single day, and my bench press is going to go up 50 pounds.
I know. There's a lot of, I think we should get into that topic eventually, because it's like, I could share some of the things that I could share.
Let's finish up the story real quick.
But anyways,
so like,
go get my master's degree, because I'm just purely just interested. I thought that would make me more reputable.
But you still wanted to train.
Still wanted to train, and that was my career aspirations at the time. And while I was getting my master's, they gave me an opportunity to teach some courses in exercise science. You know, lab courses, especially like exercise physiology lab. Very like eye-opening for me in terms of like the technologies in exercise science.
This is
like,
not boring to you at all?
Not boring. I was like being able to like measure like oxygen consumption, maximum oxygen consumption as a measure of your aerobic fitness, like using specialized lab equipment, even measuring body fat and all the different technologies there are for that. So I was like, man, this is cool, and I get to teach it to these students.
Do you agree DEXA-scan's the best?
I wouldn't say the best. It's probably the most impractical, because you need a big ass like $25,000 machine that emits radiation. But I would probably say like right now the best, most practical or close to practical method of measuring body composition would be your in-body, which is a bioelectrical impedance analysis.
It's so different compared to the DEXA scan though. Like I've done both, and they're so different every time.
Very different, and so there's
like
a lot
they
of...
tell my body percent. They say it's different every time. I was like, this isn't close.
No body composite measuring device is perfect, and accuracy is always a question, and repeatability is a question. Like if I measure it on this day and then measure it a month later, the changes that I see on this readout, is it actually due to me changing in body composition, or is it because of some factor? For example, bioelectrical impedance, you could be dehydrated like week 1, And then week 4, you do it again, and then you just drink like a gazillion gallons of water. That could throw off the readings as well. You know, so there are a lot of factors in any kind of device that you use. So a lot of people do actually like the skin fold, right? Even though it's based off of a predictive formula.
Yeah,
like
well, there's human error too.
There's human error, but there's not a whole lot of factors that could influence, you know, the output. So for me, honestly, if you're talking about repeatability, if you're just like tracking one person, I do like the skin fold.
Really?
The thing I like the most though is circumference measurements, because at the end of the day, you just want to get smaller or bigger, right?
Yeah.
So just measure it.
Yeah.
Like, who cares about like body fat percentage and all that stuff? Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's like you're trying to change your body, not like the numbers.
Yeah, and I'm talking mostly for aesthetics, but obviously for health reasons, you know, if you need to minimize your body fat, then obviously getting these tests done are great. So I've worked with DEXA scans. You know, actually, I have a license to actually do DEXA scans. We have a DEXA scan in my lab, a DEXA machine in my lab. We have something called a bod pod, which is
so it's the water one, right?
Bod pod is similar in concept as underwater weighing, but instead of using changes in water displacement, it's air displacement. Yeah, so you're in this little pod, right? And then there's skin fold and stuff like that, and in bodies or bioelectrical impedance. And so
when you're going to do your master's, you're doing all these types of studies.
I'm doing all these things, learning about it, and it was really
just
cool.
to help your business.
Yeah, really cool. And this was just so I can, well, the teaching part was just, I decided to teach because it was an offer, like it was an opportunity.
Did you pay for this or just no?
No. They say, hey, Eddie, do you want to be a TA? You can teach my labs, like the exercise physiology professor. And I was just like, dude, I would love to. So I had to take a little bit of time off from like training because I didn't have a limited amount of time.
So you own part of this gym though. So did you just like give up ownership?
So no, I just remained owner, but I just never put in any kind of sweat equity anymore. So I didn't train as much, you know, in this business. I was just an owner.
Did you get anything out? Did you get any output?
Yeah. I'll make whatever profits we make. I get that percentage. Okay. You know, but I wasn't in our structure of like payments was like a little unique because there would be extra money if I trained that client. You know what I'm saying? And so, or if I brought in that client or something like that. But I was definitely training a lot of the athletes in the other facility.
Yeah, the kids.
So I had the business, I had that, and I was still contributing to those businesses as well because that was my goal.
At the end of the day, you're kind of a businessman.
Yeah. But I was also getting these new opportunities to teach and work with the science of exercise. And then I was taking classes, like advanced courses. And I'm just like getting inspired. Like every day I'm going to these classes and they're all at night.
Wow.
And so I would go like train in the morning, in the all day or all morning train clients, then go to the strength conditioning physically train, then go to my class or go teach my exercise physiology lab for like an hour and a half, and then I'll go to my classes at night and then I'll go home and study. That was my day.
Wow.
And so but I was very inspired by the things I was learning, all this advanced knowledge, teaching, and I just had a lot of fun. And I started realizing like my mind was consumed on teaching, like the teaching and relating with the students. And like, I just love that interaction. And, you know, part of getting a master's degree is you conduct your own independent research study.
100%.
And at that time, I thought this was the most badass study ever, and it's published and in a journal. But when I look back, I'm like so cringe. I was like, this was not that cool. It was just like what
was the study?
It was just a study on like how it's a study.
Did you come up with the idea because you said you could conduct your own study?
Well, no, it was through like discussion with my mentor, you know, there. And so every professor has their own lab and they do specific type of research. And this one lab, and he's like a head scientist for Nike now. He doesn't work there anymore. Okay. But we came up with this idea based off this concept this phenomenon called post-activation potentiation, which is basically a phenomenon where if you like expose your muscle to some high level contraction, like a forceful contraction for a very brief period of time, your muscles can output more power. So it could, a very practical scenario would be like, say I did like heavy squats and then I sprinted. Yeah. So there's research that show that those heavy squat, that heavy contraction of your, like say quadriceps, can enhance the contractility of that muscle for a brief period of time, make you run faster. Gotcha. So I wanted to study that, and that's what I did, and did a research study on that.
So you did this badass study. You felt super cool.
Yeah, I felt super cool because my whole thing in my business was about like speed training, developing explosiveness. So that's kind of why I developed that study, and my advisor was so supportive of it. He liked the idea. But it was a very simple study.
And at this point, were you like, I want to be professor?
Not even at that point.
Okay.
At that point, I was just like, whoa. I was just like just opening myself up to like these experiences. Like, man, research is cool. Like, it's like cool that I can like collect this data and look at things more objectively, because up to that point, I'm such a bro scientist.
About something that you feel so passionate about.
Yeah, and I'm just like, you know, I've like read so much about how to like say get an athlete faster, or how I can make someone stronger or more fit or lose weight. I'm reading these from sources. I don't even know where these sources are coming from, you know? Why can't I be the person that's providing those sources, right? Like providing the knowledge, right? And so...
And it's more trustworthy because you got your data from yourself.
Yeah, and so I love that aspect of it. And I remember just like, this is how I decided to go get a PhD. This is so silly, but... It wasn't this like moment of like where it was like over a span of like months where I'm just like, okay, I think I want to be a professor, you know? I remember just like walking in the hallways at the university I was getting my master's at, Cal State Fullerton. They have a great exercise science program there. And I just, my mentor, his name is Dr. Lee Brown, was walking, and he's very well accomplished, but he's walking towards me. I'm walking towards him. I was like, hey, Dr. Brown, how's it going? And then he's like, hey, Eddie, what's up, man? What's going on? And then he just asked me, like, what are you going to do after this? I was like, I have my training business. It's doing really well. And he was like, yeah, I remember he visited me and stuff. He was just like, wow, this is great.
Did you do a session?
No, he was kind of older at the time, but he was just like so passionate about strength and conditioning and stuff. He's one of the pioneers in this field. And so, you know, wrote textbooks on it and stuff. And so, he's very unassuming. You wouldn't think he's like a strength and conditioning guy because he's so lengthy and skinny. But anyways, he was a great guy. He took a lot of time and effort in me to mentor me. And so I remember just him saying like, Eddie, why don't you go get a PhD? I was like, in what? He's like, in this field. So you've been in this field since an undergrad, right? I was like, and you feel like you've built a wealth of knowledge up to this point. I was like, yeah, I have.
Sure.
He's like, I was like, well, like, so you think I should be a professor? And he's like, yeah, or whatever, you know. He's like,
what was your reaction to that?
I was just like, nah, because it's like, I was like, how long does that take? It's like usually like 4 years. I was like, no way, I'm done with school, you know. Yeah. He's like, Eddie, think of it this way, and this has stuck to me, and I say this advice to all my students, so it's like generational, right? Whatever advice he gave me that impacted me, I'm saying it to my students.
Because now you have your own TAs and stuff.
Yeah,
now, right?
and so, and I have my grad students and my undergrads and stuff, and so he's just said like, hey, Eddie, like, with this knowledge that you gain, not the degree, just the knowledge that you gain, you feel like you've become somewhat of an expert, right? And you feel like with this expertise, you are able to have more opportunities. In this case, you are gaining more clients, more exposure, more like attention from people who need your services because you portray yourself as an expert in this field because of your education and your experience, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, imagine what you can do with a PhD level expertise in a very niche field. And I was just like, dang. I was like, I got like chills. I get chills when I say that because I'm just like, man, he's absolutely right. Like, it's not about attaching a degree to a career. It's attaching the knowledge you're gaining from this degree program and the opportunities that can bring. And when I look back, he was absolutely right. You know,
a lot of people don't take that though.
Yeah.
They just attach the degree to
a career, right?
Not the knowledge that could lead you to
whatever you want.
Opportunities.
Oh man. And so when he said that, he's like, you could become a professor. Sure. It's a great job. And then you could be a researcher and a teacher while being a professor, and you can like publish your work and whatever. But my point is, if you go to a PhD program, a good one, and you develop this like expertise that very little have in this entire world, relatively speaking, don't you think that you will have a lot of opportunities? And the reason why I told you that is because I feel like you are an opportunist. You like go seek challenges and you're willing to try new things and take risks. So I'm sitting there listening to him. I'm not even talking. I'm just like, dude, I'm blown away. Yeah. And I was just like, but damn, that's like 4 years or more school. And I have this business. Yeah. Like, there's no way I could do everything. And I mentioned that. And he was like, how long have you been doing this business? I was like, since I was like 17, 18. And then, he's like, if all goes bad, I'm pretty sure you can start it up again. He's just saying that. I was just like, he's an older guy. So I'm just like listening to him. I was just like, dang, he's right. Like, I have enough experience now where I can definitely, start that back up again if I needed to. Man, so
you ditched it?
Dude, bro, like I remember like going to work and doing my business, and the whole time thinking like getting becoming an expert in this field would be freaking awesome, right? And so I want to be the guy that like inspires the coaches here, the trainers, even the doctors, the physical therapists, the all these professionals in fitness and allied health. I want to be the guy to like inform them, right? And teach them and all that. And so I just like one day I just was like, I'm going to apply to some programs, because there's some like researchers, I read their work while I was like doing my own thesis for my master's degree. I read their work and I love what they do. And so, man, I just applied to several programs. And when you apply to PhD programs, you actually apply not really to the school, you apply to the guy that you want to work with, or girl you want to work, or woman you want to work with, like the professor you want to work with.
Sure.
And so, there was just like, several professors / researchers that I wanted to work with, and I just applied. And then I remember I went to go present my thesis at this sports medicine conference I think it was in Denver. And then
shouts out Colorado.
Yeah, one of the professors that I applied to, he's at Florida State. Okay. Dr. J. Kim. And so I talked to him and he was like, I'll take you in. And I was like, holy crap. And I was like, and I told myself, if I get it, I'm going to sell my business, leave everything behind and go. And so I promised myself that. And so when he told me that, I was like, holy crap.
This is real.
I have to go. This is real. This is a huge shift in my life. And
so you gave the percentage back.
I gave that. Well, they just, they weren't happy. Right. But they understood, and they paid me out whatever my percentage was. And then I think I was so naive at the time. I just kind of gave a lot of it back, because I just felt bad.
What do you mean?
Like I didn't take a full cut. And so I just gave it back because I just felt bad. And I felt I wanted them to succeed too. Yeah. Not that my share would have made like a huge dent, but I don't know. It was just like, I just felt bad because up to that point, I guess I could have been more transparent with them, but I didn't know really for myself what I was going to do. And so it was a surprise to them. I was like, hey, I'm going to take off to Florida State for 4 years. Yeah. They're like, wait, what? And then I was just like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be, I want to put my businesses in the past and pursue this education. She's like, what are you going to do after? I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe become a professor, which seems to be a very, very worthwhile career to pursue, but we'll see. And that was it.
How did you drop, I guess, the clients and the business when, like, dude, like at this point, like you have a lot of people depending on you. A lot of people who trust you.
That was the hardest part.
A lot of people who like you made a huge impact on their life. And like that's so hard to let go, you know?
Definitely. That was probably the hardest part. But fortunately, throughout like my time at Long Beach State and also through my time at Cal State Fullerton getting my master's, I met so many great people. People who were trying to start something that I started when I was 17, 18. You know what I'm saying? They're like in their 20s, but they wanted to start like a fitness business and stuff.
Yeah, right. Even though you're like 4 years ahead.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I didn't feel I was like superior to them or anything, but it was like I wanted to help them. Yeah. And so they were good people too. And so I remember there was one female and one male trainer, and I became good friends with them. And I just asked them, like, would you want to take on clients? And this is a great way for you to just jumpstart your business. And the woman trainer was actually more interested in strength and conditioning. So I said, perfect. I had
this guy fits.
Yeah. And then I had all these athletes, and then some of those athletes were like girls too. And I feel like there was part of me felt like, I think those girls would definitely enjoy having a woman strength coach just to like relate in some ways that maybe women can relate. And maybe there's like this disconnect between me and those girls because, I may not understand everything, and so, and it turns out that was like the best move for them because they loved her. Right. Yeah. And then some of my other clients I gave to, a first year student, undergrad that I met.
He was trying to start.
Yeah, he was trying to try a business, and so it ended up being fine, you know. And so they did great, and I still keep in touch with them, and they're doing their thing and stuff. And so and then I left. I bounced to Florida, man, and so that was crazy. When I think about the time, I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Did you party at all in college?
No, I was kind of
undergrad.
Not really.
I feel like
I was a loser.
I don't even think that's a loser, bro. It just sounds like you were working so hard that like you had no time for it.
It doesn't mean I didn't have fun. Of course, I had fun with my friends, and we do parties and stuff. But I wasn't like a frat boy. I didn't care about stuff like that. Yeah. And so I remember like being invited to this like frat orientation thing if I wanted to be interested. I just sat there. I was like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, this is so not me. Yeah. And I was like, I'm gonna go work on my business, and so I kind of was just in that mindset, and so I never really partied. Even at Florida State, I didn't really. Well, obviously, I was a lot older now at that time, and getting a PhD, so I didn't have time to do that stuff.
I didn't party that much in college too, but like, did you ever feel like the fear of missing out type of deal? In that aspect, did you feel like you missed anything? I mean, hindsight right now, probably not. You're like, everything worked out great. Yeah. But like during that time, like, did you have like just like you didn't go to like football games or like all these other things?
Well, I think it helped that I was at state schools like Cal State Fullerton and Cal State Long Beach. They're like commuter schools. They're not like your Alabama, Florida State, like USC. They're not those kind of schools. So no, not really, man. Like I wasn't really into all that. But I did have a lot of fun with my friends. Yeah. They weren't necessarily from college. They were just people I've met. Yeah. And so like, I was really into snowboarding. I was really into like obviously exercising. We played basketball all the time. Like I was just into all that stuff, but I never really felt this. I know I have FOMO for sure, even till this day, but I think at the time I didn't really have FOMO because those weren't the things I was interested in. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I don't think I missed out on much.
That's what's up. So you go to Florida and now you're like, you're a big kid now. Like...
So I'm at Florida State University. I'm in my 20s still. And I'm just like, I feel so inadequate. Like I'm going into a skeletal muscle physiology lab. Okay. So this guy studies. What is that? So skeletal muscle physiology is basically the study of how your muscles work. And my mentor, my advisor, my doctorate advisor, his lab was focused on aging, like the aging muscle. Okay. And so through that, you learn about like muscle damage, the physiology, the changes in muscle physiology as you age. Even things like muscle growth. He studied muscle growth all the way down to the molecular cellular level. Like he would actually look at like cells and different molecules. Yeah, and so he did a lot of that stuff, and that's why I applied because I love that stuff. And when I read that stuff, I don't know like how do they measure this stuff? How do they like actually like study this? And so
you gotta learn how.
I learned how, and so. When I went there, I saw all this lab equipment. Like this isn't like performance applied science lab. It's like basic science lab where you're sitting like at a bench with like pipettes and all that stuff.
With microscopes and shit?
Microscopes. And it was crazy. And I was just like using chemicals, and I had to learn so much on my own. And he was looking at like genes, related to genetics. Changes in muscles. Yeah. And so he was at the core an exercise physiologist. So he studied muscle within the context of exercise or loosely related to exercise. He also was in dabbling in nutrition too, like certain nutrient compounds, how do they affect muscle chemistry, muscle physiology and stuff like that. So one of the first studies that I did was looking at this supplement compound called HMB. And it's like a derivative from the amino acid leucine. Okay. And so he did a study. It was a funded study, and it was in animals, in rats. And that was my first experience working with
hands-on.
Yeah, and so I was like working with animals and see how it would change their physiology. And so not their physiology, but just change their body in certain ways at the cellular molecular level. So our lab was focused on the muscle, so we would extract the muscle and study the muscle and the chemistry within the muscle and all that. There's like neuroscientists would extract the brain and the nerve cells, and there was like other physiologists that were focused on the digestive system. They would take the digestive tract. So we would all like destroy this like rat, and I hope like PETA's not like going to come after you or anything, but this was for scientific experiment. And so we would study it just to see what these like compounds would do and how it would affect. And so, over time, like my time there, like I learned a lot about like just the basic science of like muscle physiology, more so specifically in muscle metabolism. And so, so I knew how muscles, like at the most basic level, why muscles grow when you exercise or lift weights, and why they atrophy with aging and damage and stuff like that. And
metabolism is a loose term over here.
Very loose term,
you know? And people are like, oh, like I can't burn fat because I have a low metabolism
or slow metabolism,
slow metabolism, and like, or like I can't gain weight because I have a fast metabolism. Like, can you break that down?
Yeah. So metabolism, so a lot of people do misuse that term metabolism. They mean more so caloric expenditure, which is not really metabolism. It's part of metabolism, but it's not. So metabolism is just all the biochemical processes, all the reactions that happen in every single cell of your body to keep your body alive. So everything runs, cells run, like muscle cells, nerve cells, they all run through reactions, right? Chemical reactions. And so that's what metabolism is. And some of those chemical reactions, they require energy. So you expend energy to do like your cells to do something. So for example, like a muscle contraction, your muscle cells or fibers need to contract. That requires some processes, metabolic processes that require energy. And so you expend energy there when you exercise because of that reason. So metabolism is just a culmination of all of those processes. And if you look at, there's like metabolic pathways, as we call it. It's basically a map of all the different reactions that occur within every single cell in your body.
So basically every time people use metabolism, it's like the wrong way.
Yeah, they're not like, so when they say like, oh, my metabolism is screwed up. And I was like, oh, what part of your metabolic pathway is screwed up?
And then they can't explain it.
It's like, what do you mean? And it's just like, well, what do you mean by your metabolism screwed? I was like, oh, I just don't burn calories. I was like, oh, you're talking about caloric expenditure. Like, that's what I meant. I was like, no, that's not what metabolism. And I don't get into these petty debates with people, but in my mind, I'm just thinking like,
a lot of people learn things because other people just say it. Versus like they didn't really study it.
And I try not to impose on people I don't give unsolicited advice and stuff, but if it comes up and they ask me, I do it. And that's kind of led me to my Instagram page, which is Dr.Eddie Joe.
I wanted to talk to you about that. So basically like you get your PhD at the end of the day, right? And like no one I don't read peer-reviewed articles,
which most people don't.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of people don't, but I will read a nice pretty picture that teaches me how to deadlift properly and then gives me a little bit of science behind it, and it's less than 1 minute to read. You're like, whoa, that's dope. I came to the realization that no one's going to read a peer-reviewed article. That's my job because I'm trained in that through my master's and my PhD especially. But I'm like, and I've been publishing my research as well. I was like, but who the hell's going to read this? Like the reason why we do the research is to impact the way that people do things, right? General society, right? There needs to be a middle ground. Like there needs to be a messenger, right? A platform that people could digest.
Exactly. And there's all these like blogs on the internet, whatever, but some of them, they don't reference any studies, or they don't know how to read the studies and interpret them correctly. So I was like, why can't I just do that? I'm the one that produces the research, reads the research, trains the research. Why can't I be the guy that puts that stuff on the internet and interpret it in a way that people can understand, which at the end of the day is what it's all about. And so I created the Instagram site where it's basically all infographics of not just my research, but just research in general within our field.
Do you do everything yourself? All the infographics?
All the infographics.
You design them yourself and everything?
Yeah, I do.
You put it together?
I put it all together.
It's all you?
Yeah. And
no way.
I do. Yeah, I don't have anyone do it. Hey, I'll tell you what, man. When I got
How much time does that take, bro? Per post?
It does take some time. I ain't gonna lie.
Like, sometimes I'm curious, how long does it take?
Dude, like some of them take like over an hour. I just sitting because
that's not that long.
You're like designing for like one infographic that you absolutely get no money for.
Yeah.
Like I'm sometimes sit there, it's like, why am I doing this?
Why do you do it?
I don't know. I think it was just my need to like disseminate science to people in a way that's applicable to them. I think that's what drove me to do it. And I think I was sort of like intrigued by the sort of social media in general, like how it works and how it influences people. And I didn't really want to be an influencer or anything. And I don't think I am, but I've definitely created a good amount of following relative to people in my field that put out like, this type of content.
Yeah, Eddie doesn't have butt photos on his Instagram.
No, I don't do that stuff. I'm not gonna sell out. But I don't have any pictures of myself. No one even knows how I look like. It's just all infographics. And I always max out the word count or the word limit on those captions, and I write a mini article.
Okay.
And it could be anything from nutrition to exercise to like deadlifting to like, it could be anything. And so, so that was kind of like the whole idea behind that Instagram page. It's just, I wanted to like disseminate that scientific knowledge that is really difficult for most people to understand and interpret. And so
have you had a lot of people reach out and saying like, thank you?
Like a lot of people. A lot of people. And that gives me more motivation to keep doing it. And then, so I kind of started that. I started that after my PhD. I was like, I got a job as a professor and
at Cal Poly?
At Cal Poly Pomona. And so I started like within my first year, I think.
I guess so when you finished your PhD, what inspired you to like, oh yeah, I'm going to circle this around and become a professor versus start up the businesses again? Right.
So, obviously during my PhD, I just was thinking, okay, I have to, although I'm going to gain this expertise, I need to be real. I got to eventually make a living, right? What do I want to do? And I feel like with this expertise, I have the unique opportunity to just do what I want, right? And so I thought about consulting. I thought about like running a training business again. But as a PhD student, you also become an instructor. You teach, you can lecture courses, and they give you those opportunities. And so I was teaching like exercise physiology lab courses, exercise physiology lectures, and I would do a lot of guest lectures and stuff. And I just love being up there and speaking on something that I know. And the other part was like being able to relate with students and interact with them and just be a source of motivation or just a source of like advice or just someone to talk to about life, and so
similar to training.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the nuances of training, like that you may not feel as like there in other professions, it was there. Like as a at this point, I was an instructor, right, as a PhD student, and so a lot of the things that I gained and was something that gave me satisfaction as a trainer was also present within this interaction with students. And so, and I just talked to them about my business ventures and stuff. And I'm just like feeling like, I feel like all my experiences
your past business ventures.
Yeah, my past business and all the stresses that I went through, all the hurdles, all the successes, sharing that with, it's basically giving them my testimony, like how I got to this point. Yeah. It was, I can tell it was inspirational to a lot of them as well, because they were struggling with figuring out what their path is and they're in college, and so.
A lot of people don't know what they want to do.
Yeah, and which is fine, 100%. It's like my timeline is not your timeline and vice versa. And so I was like, this is what I've done so far, and this is what led me to this point here where I'm talking to you at Florida State, and you as an undergrad, as a PhD student. So, I love those things, and I love the research being in the lab. And then I didn't want to work with animals too much, like experiment. I wanted to work with humans. So I kind of shifted my research focus to humans and looking at muscle physiology.
Did you do dissections and stuff with that over there too?
No, I didn't do that. There were opportunities to do muscle biopsies, but at the end of the day, it was like really expensive, and our funding was limited. And I was like, what information does that really provide? So my focus was looking at like muscle wasting during a severe caloric restriction situation. So I work with like obese test subjects. And so, but yeah, like through all that research, I was like basically doing what professors do, right? And I was like, man, this is great, and I talked to my old professors and just asked them about like their life balance. So, work-life balance kind of thing. And, they're just like, Eddie, it's an awesome job, man.
Really?
Yeah, and I just like
positive feedback.
And I was just like, I know this could be sort of biased because you are a professor, but at the same time I was listening. And these professors wouldn't BS me. They would just tell me, and so I was just like, yeah, you know what? I think this is something I'm going to try. And then but I also wanted to come back to California. And so in our field, it's like you go where the jobs are. Yeah. And so I didn't know if there was going to be a position in California. And so in Southern California. And so luckily, man, I remember I was in the print room at Florida State, and they usually post like job postings there. Yeah. And there was one like Cal Poly Pomona. I was like, dude, I live right there. And it was for nutrition though, in the nutrition department. And I was like, but I could still dabble in nutrition. So I was going to apply to it just to get me back to California. So I pulled it down, right beneath it, it was exercise science for Cal Poly Pomona. So I was like, oh, hell yeah.
You got this job from a flyer.
Well, the job announcement.
I know.
And then so
you found the job announcement from
on
a flyer.
Yeah. And then I think it was like destiny because it was like right next to my hometown,
Sure.
right? And so I applied to
Full
it.
circle, dude.
Full circle, man. I applied to a couple universities, some in Chicago, some in one in Rhode Island, and those were my offers. And then Cal Poly was the very last one. I remember going for the interview, and I was just like, I got to get this one. So I gave my best interview, and then I got it, and then I was like, heck yeah, and I made it back to Southern California, my hometown, and rest is history. I've been there going on my 10th year now.
How does it feel to be a tenured professor, bro?
10-year professor. I mean, dude, honestly, like it's been such a fun ride, man.
Like 17-year-old Eddie, if you told him like,
oh my God,
you're going to be a tenured professor at Cal Poly Pomona, like, what would you say? Would you believe it?
Honestly, if I tell like some of my friends from high school, which I don't keep in touch with a lot of them, but I tell them that, I'm a professor now. They're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
They're just like, no way, man. Yeah. So them knowing me as a kid, like they just, they couldn't believe it. But I think people who knew me, like in terms of like my work ethic, they could see it. They're like, yeah, I can see like you have such a passion for this field. Yeah. And you always loved, opened yourself up to mentorship. Sure. And you were also, and when you had opportunity, wanted to mentor people like too.
Give.
Right. And then you love like talking about the things you're passionate about. So this was like a perfect, profession for me, and interact with young people and just share my story with them and just listen to their struggles. And over the years, I realized, man, young people, they just, I'm not saying I'm like terribly old or anything, but I'm older, but yeah, younger people, like, man, everyone's in different circumstances. Some people come from poverty, some people come from riches, some people come from like poor education systems. So I learned over the years, like, man, most important lesson is like treat everyone differently in the sense that they come from different places. Don't just like say, if they don't turn in an assignment or do poorly on an exam, don't just say, oh, they're lazy, because they might be at a home.
You don't know
with
what they're going through.
Yeah. They might have no Wi-Fi, no, nothing, no house. Sometimes I had a student who was homeless. Yeah. And so those are like the things that I learned, the more important things that I learned. Yeah. Be empathetic and just understand, like, give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't make assumptions, but more importantly, ask. So like, hey, what's your story? What's your situation? Yeah. And I come to find there's like a lot of students in like bad situations.
And then they'll just, at that point, no one really asks. So they will just like let their heart out to you sometimes. Yeah.
So at this point in my career, that's the most appealing part of my job. Wow. It's not the research, running this big human performance research lab. It's not like publishing papers. It used to be. It's not even like going up and lecturing in front of like 100 students or whatever. It's more so the effect that I have on even just one student. Yeah. And I'm not saying I make a huge impact, but if I can make a little one in a positive way, the
ripple effect will be huge.
Yeah. And I know I sound like kind of like a, like a little cliche shit, but it's really true. Yeah. Like it really is like very rewarding to be in that situation like almost every day. And so
that's beautiful, bro.
Yeah, but in the beginning, I was very driven to start up a research lab and work with different sports medicine and fitness and exercise companies and do contract work and like just publish papers and the social media stuff. But
how do you feel devoid of? I guess you said like the business side of you was like just ingrained in you from like an early age, and for so long you did no business. Yeah. Right? And so like, I guess now being in the position you are, how do you fill that void of like business?
Oh man. So this is crazy, right? So that's a very good question, because you think as a professor, running a research lab, teaching courses, mentoring students, there's no business involved, right? But I found that like my expertise as a researcher, being able to research, things related to human performance, fitness, nutrition, whatever, right? A lot of companies need my expertise as a researcher, right? And so companies, initially it was like supplement companies. And so I used to like be in contact with supplement companies, and then we can actually contract a study with the supplement company, or any company for that matter. They can sponsor or commission a study. They need your services, because all these companies, they want to do university research, independent university research, mostly for R&D, right? And some companies, they just want it because they want like positive results so they can promote it. But I don't do that kind of research because it's so biased, right? and I didn't want to put myself in that position. So it was more for like R&D to see if these like supplements have some type of effect on whatever measure. And so
good or bad.
Yeah. So there's a business aspect of it where I would negotiate with them terms, and, you know, part of that contract, when they give you the money for fund the project, part of that funding involves your salary. You get money for your own pay because you're using your own time to conduct the study, right? So I learned this in my first year, and so I started reaching out to all these companies and stuff.
And you did it yourself. So you were like, hey, this is what I do.
This is what I do.
I could help you in this way.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
pay me.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'll budget it out, like what I need for like materials, what I need to pay test subjects, what I need for this and this and this. And I would always hire like a grad student to be my assistant. So I'll pay them a stipend or a salary. And then this is what it costs to.
And it kind of helps. You learn more for your professor job too.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so this is my rate, and that rate is kind of controlled by the university.
Right out of like, I guess your PhD, like, did you know you wanted to do that too?
Yeah. Like I learned all those things from, my mentors, and,
so other people do it too. It's not just you.
So there's two ways to do it. You can do contract work, which is usually with some type of like company. Or you can do.
Is this like part, like you were talking about, like 24-hour fitness and like these
or
big
no,
gyms?
that's different. That's consulting.
Different. Okay.
Yeah, that's consulting. This is like related to my work at the university. So through the university, I have my research lab, and with my research lab and my expertise as a research, I can contract with like different companies to do testing, like say on products or something. So in the beginning, it was like supplement companies. So I would do like, I remember I did one with, I probably shouldn't name them actually, but I did one with a few like bigger supplement companies in the beginning. And so obviously not only does it help with my salary, because it ups my salary, because I have this contracted work in addition to me teaching and all the other stuff that I do as a professor. But at the same time, it brings my research lab exposure, including the university, as well as give opportunities for students to do research, because I need a team, you know? And so I've been doing that since going on 10 years now. And so that's been that's been the part of my profession in academia that satisfies my entrepreneurial interest, right? And so on the other side of that, I always say this to all my colleagues who have a PhD in the same field. I was like, we are in a field where the industry related to our field is just expanding like crazy. Health, medicine, sports medicine, and fitness. It's booming, right? And so you need to ride that wave. And so these companies, they don't hire like a lot of PhDs and like doctorate level.
Why?
Because it costs too much, right? Because why would a guy with a PhD just get paid, like a mid-range salary when they have all this education and this company relies on their expertise, right? So, I always say like you have to not only work as a professor, but you should consult, and especially in this field, right? So I started my consulting business like at the end of my first year as a professor. And so the consulting wasn't like one-on-one consulting, like dietary programs and stuff like that. I did that like sort of on the side for certain people, but it was mostly industry consulting. And so with my connections with the supplement industry in terms of doing research, they also reached out for me to do just independent consulting. Not really do research studies, but help them like gather research studies related to some product that they want to develop, and just inform them. It's kind of like how I'm doing my Instagram, basically taking that hardcore science, the data, the evidence, and writing them a report, or at least talking to them about what does this all mean,
and how
to help them develop new products. So I was doing that for the supplement industry. Then I started doing that more. And so over the years, I become, my research is a little bit more now more so focused on recovery, short-term and long-term recovery of muscle. And so I've been working a lot with like companies that are developing products around that concept of recovery.
What inspires you to do all these other things? Because dude, there's so many like professors out there who's like, I lecture, I do this and I enjoy it, and that's all that I want to do.
Cause I don't know. I think a part of me, it's like, I feel like the amount of effort I've put into developing my expertise, and that's ongoing. It's not like it just stopped after I graduated from my PhD program. I'm continuously learning. So I'm just like, I feel like teaching and doing research that sort of doesn't maximize the potential of my expertise.
Yeah.
I feel like people will pay me for my expertise.
Yeah.
And so with that mindset,
capitalized on it.
Yeah, capitalized on it. And so, and then a part of that consulting is also doing expert witness work. It's basically, you know, in lawsuits that mostly it's personal injury, like especially in like a fitness setting, like
Sure.
Not to name any companies, which I can't obviously, but you know, like say a personal trainer from a big box gym is working with a client. Let's say like the client was type 2 diabetic, they take insulin and then they pass out during their workout. Yeah. And so there's a lawsuit, right? So these legal teams need to bring in experts to like look at the case and provide an opinion. So I found that was a thing for us. And so I started doing that. And
crazy,
so
bro.
I remember my first case, it was super exciting. None of it ever really goes to court because they usually settle. Yeah. But I would go to like depositions and stuff and talk to lawyers and give my opinions and stuff. And so
because they don't know the subject.
They don't know the subject and they need someone to interpret the research and also just give like, I'm not a medical doctor, but I am well-versed in physiology. So for that example, like I would explain like, why did that person pass out? Because physiologically this was happening. You know, they took insulin, they worked out. Both of those things together drop your blood sugar really, really low. And it could get to a point where they're hypoglycemic and they lose consciousness or they pass out or whatever, they get sick. And so the client was like on like one of those Bosu ball thingies, the other way around. Yeah. I think these workouts are kind of dumb,
half Bosu ball squat.
Yeah, and they're doing squats, and so it's already unstable. Like they're like struggling to balance, and this person was older, and then the blood sugar dropped, and they just fell off of it. Dang. And then you know, and so so I would explain like why that happened and what would have been. You know, obviously either the plaintiff or the defendant hires me as, or like brings me on as an expert, but basically I would have to justify like why, you know, which side is, you know, and so, you know, I would say like something like there was some negligence on the part of the trainer, for example, because this is something that they should have been aware of. Sure. Yeah. And
what do you tell your students, or I guess anyone like who you're teaching or lecturing, or someone who's on the same path as you, who were on that they just don't know what they want to do type of deal, and they're just like kind of just going with the flow, they're taking their classes, they're kind of enjoying what they're learning, but they're just like, what the fuck am I going to do with this?
So I don't even say sadly, because it's just a reality, and it's totally fine that students don't know what they want to do while even in college, but it's, I would say, a majority of students, you know, they're going to college to try to figure things out. And sometimes they don't even have the motivation to even go to class. I do say this a lot. Like, don't just go to college because it's just what you're supposed to do after high school, because it's expensive and it's time and energy. I rather, if you don't know what the heck you want to major in, you don't know what you want to study, you don't know what you're passionate about, you can go to college and try to figure that out, but really college is not designed for that. You know, you have to do a lot of self-exploration. So I say, like, before you spend even $1 on college education, do some self-exploration. And these days with the internet and access to all this information, you can search whatever the heck you want. Sure. But mainly it's do networking, talk to people, you know, see what other people are doing out there. There's so many professions out there that you can get into. There's so many business opportunities you can get into. There's so many concepts that can be developed that can turn into a business. Explore those things, right? And you're not young. You're turning into an adult before college, right? And so you're old enough to do some critical thinking, to network, to pick the brains of people who are very well accomplished. And you can have some discernment and at least create a general idea of like what you're interested in. And therefore, as you enter college, like your educational pursuits are tailored towards those interests. It may not end up being the thing that you do, because that's totally fine. You can major in English and end up being like a businessman. Sure. And that's totally fine. But why not spend money on something that is going to enrich your passions and your interests and stuff,
versus just paying for figure it out. Yeah. When you could do that beforehand.
Yeah. And you're not going to figure it all out. And of course, the educational pursuits in college can help foster that process of figuring things out, but it shouldn't be the thing that you solely depend on, right? And so I do see a lot of students in that sort of situation, and a lot of students just kind of they sort of like default to physical therapy, occupational therapy, PA school, med school, whatever, you know, which is fine, but they default to it because that's what everyone else is doing. Yeah. And so there's this like culture that's sort of present within in the university setting. And so I do advocate to students like, hey, just because you are a major in exercise science or kinesiology, it doesn't mean you need to go be a physical therapist. Sure. Like, what are you passionate about? And it's okay to quit school if you feel like it's not adding to your life, you know? And
that's crazy because a lot of professors would never
say that. It's like, I don't want them to think that education is only gained from a school setting, awesome. Especially these days.
I wanted to talk to you about some of your slides, I guess, that I was like curious about.
Oh, from that.
Instagram.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about was, do you know who Firas Zahabi is?
You know, I'm not familiar.
He's the MMA coach of a lot of athletes.
Okay. No. The name, it does ring a bell. Okay. Yes. And I don't know too much, but
his whole philosophy on, I guess, like working out and training, maybe it's just for fighters, is that like no one should ever be sore. It's like, if you want to be able to do a lot of pull-ups, I'd rather you do 1 pull-up today, 2 pull-ups tomorrow, 3 pull-ups, 3 pull-ups again, 4 pull-ups every single day to get a greater volume than just doing 10 pull-ups and then you're just like sore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. I do agree to that.
Real quick, let me turn on.
Yeah. So, again, like I said before, everything needs some context, right? So I do agree in to some extent, but obviously I don't have a full, I'm not fully knowledgeable about like his philosophies and stuff, but based off of your brief description.
Well, basically my question was like, is it okay to be sore? And like, is soreness the process of like getting in better shape and like all these other things? And does it need to be?
No. Okay. So here, I'm going to get kind of sciencey here.
Go ahead. Go in.
So just like when you cut your skin or scrape your skin, there's going to be soreness. Okay. And that's a result of inflammation, which is the first part of protecting your skin and starting the healing process of your skin, because you just damaged it, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, soreness is a result of inflammation. Inflammation is a result, or the normal inflammation is a result of damaged cells, damaged tissue, right? Same thing is happening in the muscle when you apply tension to it. So the thing that causes damage in muscle tissue is tension. So imagine me contracting against like a heavy dumbbell.
For a bicep curl.
Yeah, like a bicep curl. There's going to be tension produced within the bicep muscle, right? Your muscle fibers are contracting, meaning they're trying to shorten the biceps, while the weight is pulling the opposite way. So you can imagine there's some tension, just like pulling on ends of a rubber band and then someone pulling inward on the rubber band. There's going to be tension in between those points, right? So like with anything, when a tension is applied, what could happen if tension is too much? It could tear, right? It could tear. Sometimes it's an injury, meaning the muscle actually tears. Like there's a tissue level tear, like large tears. And that's called a strain, right? Or there's just like really small tears, and that's micro level tears. And we call that muscle damage, okay? Or more specific, exercise-induced muscle damage, EIMD. And that's what a lot of us experience when we go lift weights. Work out. Or just doing something that our muscles are not familiar with. Like when I don't snowboard for a whole year and I'm going to get sore because I'm just not accustomed to it, because I've been off of it for a whole year, even though I lift weights and stuff, right? It doesn't matter. So when this tension is not, your muscles are not used to this tension, then you can have some tearing, right? And just like this, the scraping of the skin analogy I gave you, you're going to have the same process, inflammation, and that's going to trigger pain, what we call soreness or DOMS, right? And that sometimes takes 48 hours for that inflammation to set in to a point where it triggers pain. So now we have to understand, well, soreness / pain, what is that physiologically? Like biologically speaking, why do we have this thing called pain? It's sensory information from the area that's damaged to your brain. It's a protective mechanism, right? Because something is damaged. So when you scrape your skin, it's damaged, right? So when you touch it, it hurts. Why? It hurts because it's telling you stop doing that, right? Because we're trying to heal that tissue. Muscle is the same way. So the thing that caused the muscle damage and therefore the soreness is tension. So that soreness is telling you, hey, ease up on the tension until we can heal the muscle,
yeah.
right? That's fundamentally, that's it, right? So with that being said, is soreness and therefore muscle damage the thing that you need to induce adaptation, to induce muscle growth, for example, and strengthening, right? Is that the stimulus for gains,
the pain,
if you will, the pain, or more so the muscle damage? A lot of people had that mindset, like you need to kill yourself at the gym. And back in the days when I was training, it was just like, if my client wasn't sore, they think it was a bad workout, right? And I believed that at the time. But as I became more educated, I was like, you know what? Muscle damage is not the stimulus for change / adaptation. It's the tension. So you could have tension without damage, but when that tension is just enough and it's continuous, meaning it's frequent, and this is going along with the concept of consistency, why you need to be consistent to see gains, right? When that tension, that elevated tension that you're applying through lifting weights is consistent and frequent, your muscles, because we're a very sophisticated organism, your muscles, your cells, your muscle fibers recognize, hey, this tension is constantly being applied. We need to do something about this, right? So that tension becomes less stressful, less damaging, right? And so that's why we get stronger. That's why we get bigger, right? Is so that we adapt to that tension. That is the threat for damage, right? And the whole reason
you do not need to be sore,
right? So at the end of the day, it's just like the thing that you need is tension. And how do you apply that? Lifting weights, heavy weights, things that you're not used to, right? And so,
but if you just start lifting weights, I feel like you are gonna be sore.
Right. In the beginning, especially, right? Because why? Your muscles have never been exposed to that level of stress. And we call it mechanical stress, that tension, that unaccustomed tension. So when your muscle has never been exposed to that, just like how your skin, if you like never go outside and decide to go to the beach for like 10 hours, you're going to get crazy sunburn because of the stress of the UV rays. Your skin cells not used to it. Same thing. When your muscles are exposed to the tension that is applied from lifting weights for your first time ever, they're like, what the heck is going on? And obviously the tensile strength of your muscles is so weak because you've never been exposed to it. So that's when you experience the most soreness, because of you have the most damage at that point. And that's the whole concept of like progression, overload progression, because as your muscles get used to that tension, you need to change something, like either lift heavier weights, do more volume, do faster contractions or whatever, do new movement to expose your muscles to a new stress, right? Because it's already used to it, right? And that's how you progress, right? So in the beginning, everyone's sore, or when you've worked out for a while and then you change up your program, you get sore again because you're like, this is something new, right? New stress.
And so like it's tearing your muscles because it's not used to it.
It's not used to it. It's not used to that tension. So the bottom line is soreness is not the stimulus, or muscle damage, which causes soreness, is not the stimulus for change. It's the tension. So you could apply tension without having damage and soreness, right? So you should not use soreness as your indicator of a quote unquote quality workout. Okay. Because as long as you understand like your progression in terms of lifting weights, and you would understand like you are progressing the amount of tension you're applying to your muscle, right? If you don't keep track of any of the weights you lift, the exercises that you do, you don't know the tension that you're applying to your muscles is so random, right? So you don't know if it's like enough to induce adaptation, to induce change. You don't know, right? And so so that's why it's important to track everything and just make sure you're progressing, more quantitatively than just subjectively. And so going back to that philosophy is you never should be sore. It's not that you never should be sore, because sometimes you just can't get around it, right? But
because that's what I thought. I was like, I feel like if you just anyone who starts to get into fitness, like I feel like there has to be like that first exposure to some soreness.
And then to be honest, you will, right? No matter what. But I do agree, if this is his philosophy or his mindset, that soreness is not a indicator of a quality workout, I do agree with him, right? As long as you're exposing your muscles to something that will cause some type of tension to cause it to change, right? Now, here's the other thing, and this is getting really sciencey, is that not just changes in the muscle that causes you to be stronger, more powerful, more explosive. It's also changes in your nervous system, how your nervous system activates the muscle as well. So those things adapt as well. So there's so many different factors, but I do agree with him. If he has that mindset that soreness is not an indicator of a good workout, I truly believe that, and I agree with him on that. However, soreness is just part of life. It's just gonna, when your tissues get damaged, it doesn't matter if you're your eyeball, your skin, your hair, I'm sorry, not your hair, your scalp. It doesn't matter. Like if there's damage to cells or tissue, there's gonna be some type of pain because it's protecting it.
And it's gonna tell the brain like, hey,
stop messing with this. Don't apply that stress until we heal. And so it's okay to be sore. But I will say this, in the context of MMA, every time you train, you need to be at your maximum capacity, right? You have to be able to produce as much strength and force as you possibly can, because you need to do that because you're training, right? So one of the major limiters to performing to your capacity is soreness, is pain. That's the whole point of it, right? The reason why you're weak when you're sore is because that soreness is preventing you from doing that exercise. It doesn't want you to do that exercise. So therefore you're going to be weaker and you'll be like a little bit more hesitant to do that exercise. So in the context of MMA and training for MMA, when you need to go in the ring or lift weights or whatever you're doing, pull-ups or whatever, you have to do it at full capacity because you're an athlete, right? So obviously if you're getting sore every single day, that's an indication you're damaging your muscles too much
and you're probably, it's not optimal.
You're breaking down muscle. But on the other hand, you're also limiting how much you can do when you train. So it's like totally counterintuitive, right? So I agree if that is his mindset for sure.
How do you feel about there's so much about recovery these days. There's the saunas, the steam rooms, the cold plunges, the massage, all these. How do you feel about them? Are they necessary?
Right. So
myofascial release.
So there's tons, right? Like this promotes recovery. So first you need to define recovery.
And what's your definition of recovery?
So my definition of recovery is a little different than most people. Most people's definition of recovery is absence of soreness and not feeling tight, which is tightness is basically pain. It's the same signals, right? And so the absence of that means you're recovered. My definition of recovery is the healing of damaged tissue, namely muscle.
How do you analyze that?
You can analyze it through invasive methods, like actually do biopsy, but no one's going to do that, right? So we use indirect methods, basically using specialized sensors that measure how much force you can produce.
So how does someone who's regularly going to the gym?
There's really not. It's all subjective, right? So if you lift weights, you're like, I'm not pumping out as much weights, or I feel like I'm moving it slower. That's like a subjective way of knowing that, you're either fatigued or you have muscle damage. And so for me, recovery is healing, right? Tissue. The thing is, you can't measure that, right? And so I tend to then define recovery as performance recovery, being able to perform at your max capacity if you were performing at your max capacity. So if you and there's a lot of technologies to measure this, like how fast you can move the barbell, like if you have muscle damage or you're fatigued, that barbell is going to move slower. So there's some devices that can help measure that. And a lot of these premier strength and conditioning facilities, like in pro sports and D1 colleges, they have these devices. But a lot of people just define recovery as the absence of soreness, which is still an important part, right, of the whole recovery process. So within the context of an athlete who needs to perform day in and day out, like you can't tell the coach, like, hey, I think my muscles are damaged, so you need to give me like 4 to 5 days for my muscles to recover. They don't care about that stuff. So for an athlete, they just need to get to the next day and to the next day to the competition, to practice and all that. So the thing that limits them the most is soreness, right? So a lot of the industry is focused on soreness as the target of intervention for recovery. So like ice packs, like the massage guns, foam rollers, saunas, like cryotherapy, all these things manipulate that pain pathway. So
where you
don't feel the soreness.
You don't feel soreness, but they could still be damaged.
It could still be damaged, right? None of those so-called therapies, we don't call them therapies in the science. We just call them like recovery aids, or just, I don't know. There's not really a scientific term for it, but they're not really, they're not treatments or therapies.
So why does someone, when they do like a sauna or an ice bath or any of these recovery,
they feel
quote
good.
unquote, minutes, they're like, oh, it feels so good.
So it's all sensory input. So this is especially true for massage and myofascial release. I'm going to use myofascial release in air quotes though. Okay.
Why is that?
because you're not actually releasing anything. You're not like breaking scar tissue or none of that stuff with like these typical myofascial release modalities like foam rolling.
You don't think foam rolling and massage and all that, like why not?
Because when you think about myofascial release, you're like somehow physically manipulating the myofascia, which is connected tissue that surround your muscle.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, how do you know it needs to be so-called released, right? Like what is, you're tight. So I'm trying to not go too much into science, but basically, as I alluded to earlier, that feeling of tightness is not because of any physical properties in your myofascia. Usually like that's kind of the case like in long term.
Okay.
Especially if you have like accrued damage over time to the myofascia and your muscle. But in the short term, it's just sensory input from your nervous system. Okay. So when you apply things like massage and like heat, cold, or whatever, that's sensory input, right? You feel the heat, you feel the cold, you feel the pressure, right? Those same nerve tracts, they send the pain signals to the brain. It's just basically being disrupted by other sensory input.
Sure.
So for example, if I like, I guess you can call it like, oh, is it kind of like numbing you? I was like, yeah, kind of in a way. It's like, that's not the way.
Sounds like it. That's what kind of the way you're describing it.
You can kind of think of it that way.
Sure.
You're basically that nerve tract that sends the pain signals to your brain from like the inflammation and the soreness.
Sure.
It's just basically being disrupted by other types of sensory input like pressure, touch, heat, cold. So any of those they quote unquote work in the sense of short-term recovery.
So you don't think they're necessarily So you don't think they're necessary for, I guess, like the normal, like person.
Everyday individual. Like to me, for everyday
that
individuals,
sounds like an athlete.
Yeah, because they're not forced to go to the gym or train. It's just like, for like me and you, it's just like, just rest.
And recover.
Rest, eat some protein, provide your muscles with building blocks like amino acids, and rest. Like stop putting tension on it and adding more damage. Just like, again, I use the skin cell as an example all the time because you can see it, right? Well, what do? You just maybe put a little medicine on it or whatever, but at the end of the day, you just let it be, you know, and then your cells will like regenerate and it'll heal the tissue.
In a different light, though, do you know who Dr. Rhonda Patrick is?
Oh, yeah, you're gonna have to remind me. It does sound familiar though.
She's similar to what you do, but like it's mostly on the recovery side of things and just like longevity, like just living longer basically. And some studies have shown in her research that like 25 minutes, don't quote me on this, but around 25 minutes in an infrared sauna every single day, like has lessens your chances of Alzheimer's by like 90 something %.
Right.
Like,
okay. So
though that area. So like you're talking about like training and all these things. In a different light, is it beneficial in that way?
So okay. So this is kind of going along with you know, taking the scientific data and the evidence that's displayed in a peer-reviewed article, science article, and interpreting it for the general population, right? So if she did in fact say, and you know, I'm not saying that she did say this, but say like someone said infrared sauna for 25 minutes a day will reduce Alzheimer by this percentage, right? With my level of training in terms of like being as a researcher, I'm going to take that and ask more questions. What outcome measures, what variables did they measure for Alzheimer risk? Is it a valid measure, right? How did they measure it? Yeah. So that's the next question because that's super important.
I'm not sure, so I couldn't tell you.
So one way some researchers do this, they'll take like a sample of all these patients and ask them, have you done infrared sauna? It's called a retrospective study. And they say yes or no. And they look at all this data and they say, hey, look, all these people who didn't do, on average, all these people who have Alzheimer's, they didn't do infrared sauna. And obviously this is a bad example, but that's one type of research. Another type of research is called a prospective study, where they have like a control group and a experimental group. And then in the experimental group, they have them do infrared sauna, right? And then they do some type of measurement. And it could be an indirect measure for Alzheimer risk, like some kind of biochemical indicator, like something like a hormone in the blood that is somehow connected to Alzheimer risk. They could do like cognitive exams like over years and years and years, right? To see if there's any changes, and maybe that's how they came to the conclusion. But that's such an important question to ask, and most people will not ask that question, right? Because they could have done a measurement that is just not valid.
Just
right?
like correlated.
It does not actually it's not a strong indicator of Alzheimer's risk, but people just hear someone, you know, who may be an expert in that field just say it does reduce Alzheimer's risk, but most people won't ask how did they measure that, right? So
well,
I
feel like they just trust the expert
right,
that they would do that due diligence.
Yeah,
right?
which is normal, but at the same time, I'm always skeptical. Even if you have a doctor behind your name, I'm always going to ask the questions, right? And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm going to assume that they've read the research and they know exactly, like, they know enough to say with confidence that, hey, it reduces Alzheimer's risk, right? But I will ask a lot of questions related to the measurements for Alzheimer's risk. Like, how do they quantify that? How do they measure this, right? How did the experiment, how was it implemented? Is there a lot of flaws in the design of the experiment?
So you would basically need to know more information to
exactly.
I guess, like, go into
so
that.
That's basically what it goes down to, is gaining more information on how they came to that conclusion. And that's just critical thinking. That's just being like, that's just doing your part, especially if you have the expertise and you have the knowledge and research. It's important for us to ask those questions. And so I don't know enough about her work where I can make a conclusion, but I will give the benefit of doubt. But I will say this though, like, a lot of these so-called recovery treatments, even if it's for long-term prevention of something like Alzheimer's, I will say that most likely, if you do look at the research, the effects are still small, like practically speaking.
Similar to supplements.
Yeah, similar supplements and stuff. Otherwise, it'll be something that's like super groundbreaking. Every hospital in the world is doing it, right? But it's not, right? Because the data is just not there yet, right? And it's also the repeatability of the experiment. So if just one study was done on that, you cannot make a solid conclusion. And a lot of people in my field do that. Yeah. And I don't like that, because it's just like
100 people or 200 people.
It's even sometimes less than that. It's like 20 people. And it's just like the conditions of that study are not realistic, meaning like you can't, like, it's that effect will be only seen if the conditions of that study
are exactly the same.
In the same type of people, in the same type of like whatever, like environment. It's only if those conditions were repeated in a different situation, right? Sure. And so what about, like, say if a study was done in male athletes, for example? Well, what about female athletes, you know?
Kids.
Yeah, kids or whatever,
adults.
Older adults, right? So you can't extrapolate data from one study and just apply to everybody in this world, right? And so, and also studies, one thing you have to like remember is that studies are the data that's derived from studies and the results. It's all about probability of an outcome, not a black and white answer. It doesn't say it works, it doesn't work.
There's gray out there, guys.
Yeah, everything is gray, and people hate that obviously because it's not convenient for them.
They just want, they want to believe in something.
Right. And
it's something that has to be true, when in reality, like, what is true? What is true?
And it's the convenience of just saying like, yes, this works, it doesn't work. Right. And so
it's super convenient.
Yeah. But the research doesn't ever give that answer. It just gives us the probability of an outcome. If you take the supplement, the probability is that this is the effect that it will have on average, right?
And what works for someone might not work for someone else.
Right. And I have studies where I did like an experimental training program, right? Dude, on average, it showed like a 5% increase in muscle mass and strength, right?
That's
but if you look at like I just made that up.
Okay.
So let's just say like it showed average an increase in muscle mass. But if you look at every individual data, there's people who lost muscle mass. So not everybody responds the same. So it's hard to say just because a study says it works, or if this experts say this works, it doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody, right? You have to look at the probability, and the only way to strengthen that probability is if multiple studies show the same outcome, right? If one study shows that outcome, doesn't mean anything, to be honest. And so it does bug me when I see like people. They may not be like professors or anything, just people just say, oh, this one study showed this, you should try it. I was just like, one study, really? It's like, hey man, like, and I guess this is the purpose of saying this on a podcast, to inform people like, hey, when people do reference like one study and say you should do it, you have to be skeptical.
And you have to question
it. You have to question it. And so hopefully that drives you to like,
do your own research
and gain the information for yourself and talk to more people. But some people just don't have the energy for that, and it's fine. Right. And
what's your opinion on sleep, dude? Because like I guess like over the last like 15 years, people are just like, I don't sleep. I'm on my grind. I'm on my hustle.
Yes.
You see like some actors like The Rock. He'll go in, he'll work out, and he'll just talk about like, oh yeah, I only like slept 5 hours a night, and then you don't need sleep. And then all of a sudden you look like 5 years ago, everyone's like, oh, like they switched their like, I get my 8 hours in, like I'm taking care of myself. Like I was just like, whoa, that was such an objective switch. Like time frame is so short, but everyone changed their I guess philosophy on sleep so quickly, regardless of not even looking at like research and stuff like that.
Right. So I was very intrigued by sleep research for a good like year. I remember I didn't conduct any sleep research myself, but I was just so fascinated by it because it was sort of a trend in our field for a little bit. And so
I feel like it's trending hard right now.
I think it's trending hard now too. And so I was reading up on it, and there's like a lot of sleep studies. So you could actually go volunteer and get paid to just sleep.
I have a buddy who just did. That's why I was curious.
They'll put all these like electrodes on your
like
head.
50 of them.
And so specifically in the context of just overall cellular health, whether it's muscle, nerve cells, whatever cell, right? You know how I was talking about metabolism, what it's defined as. So all these reactions that happen in every single cell, that's, although it's keeping you alive, ironically, it's also what's aging you, right? So so the thing is, if when you're awake, right, your metabolism is much more active because cells are more active, right? Your brain cells, your nerve cells, your muscle cells, any cell, they're just more active, right? Because when you're awake, you're eating, so your digestive cells, part of the digestive tract, are active, doing what it's doing, right? Blood cells, everything's more active, and therefore the metabolism is more active, right? But with metabolism, there's also a little bit of stress to the cells. It's just like running a car. If you never run a car, it's just going to last forever, right? But if you keep running, it's just like metabolism, right? All the combustion reactions and stuff ages the engine. So our cells are the engine, and so when these reactions, these combustion, for example, the combustion reactions are occurring, like it's damaging the cells in a way where it's aging it over time, right? And so therefore that's why our skin gets all like wrinkly and damaged, and the same thing's happening with our muscle. If you like was able to peel back the skin, you'll actually physically see bones, they lose bone mineral density and strength because of aging, right? It's hair turns gray or whatever. It's just so many things that happen, right? And so that's all a result of metabolism that's just happening over and over again every single day. So when does metabolism become less active? Sleep, right? So when you don't sleep, that means your metabolism is constantly active. You're forcing it to be active because you are awake. And so the reason why we sleep, biologically speaking, I'm not even thinking from a societal or philosophical perspective, just biologically speaking, we sleep to give our metabolism a rest, right? It doesn't shut off because otherwise we die, right? But it's not as active, right? And so that is an anti-aging mechanism. Sleep is an anti-aging mechanism. And so even with metabolism is also the source for a lot of disease states, dysfunction in cells. And so when there's enough stress, and we often call it oxidative stress, but when there's enough stress because metabolism, these chemical reactions are happening over and over again, when you accrue the stress over time, it can cause dysfunction in cells, and that could lead to disease states as well. Whether it's a gland that doesn't release this hormone, like diabetes, for example, is a metabolic disease. There's some dysfunction in metabolism. And so, if you don't, it doesn't mean sleep will prevent diseases or anything, but sleep is a way for your cells, all the cells in the body, to just be less active.
Why do you think for so long that, I guess, people were like against sleep? They're just,
I don't know. It's so weird. I think that's kind of integrating like sociology a little bit. And like, you know, for example, that mentality is like, oh, I don't need sleep. I need to like hustle and bustle. I have one life to live. And, you know, I got to make sure every hour counts that I'm alive. And so if I'm sleeping, I can't contribute to that. I totally get that, you know? And so obviously if I'm sleeping like 15 hours, 16 hours a day, which sometimes I do, right? But
that's why you look so good,
I get
bro.
it. How can I get things?
Anti-aging,
I know. I just don't want to die fast. So that's why I sleep.
That's why I'm sleeping long.
So yeah, like if from that perspective, I can't get things done. I can't run businesses. I can't be an effective.
You don't have the hours to do so.
Yeah. So it's all about balance, right? So, but I wouldn't go as far as saying like sleeping is bad for you. But just like everything else in this life, like moderation is important, right? So how many hours of sleep? Well, there's some research that show even like 4 hours of sleep is okay. You know, the rule of thumb is 8 hours, but who's to say that? Like,
unless you've like,
and then again, with the data, it's like, again, you have to look at the body of evidence, and also how are they measuring this outcome? Like what effect sleep has on blah, blah, blah. How do they measure that? Like, how do they quantify that? So those are the questions you have to ask as well. But when I look into the sleep research, between the 4 to 8 hour range is pretty optimal for your cells to, I don't want to say reset, because it doesn't really reset, but it's for your cells to at least have a chance to
recover.
Yeah. So you can call it recovery. Yeah. It's like the damage, the stress that is caused by just general metabolism, it can recover from that. And so, and there's a lot of like different, like I can get into real detail, but you know, but anyways, it generally speaking, it is just a chance for your cells to recover, right? And to deal with the stresses of being alive from metabolism. And so,
Sure.
Yeah.
For, I guess, what's your advice to, since you have all this experience from training at 17 years old through all the way up through your PhD, and you've known all the studies about a lot of like exercise science and physiology and all these things, what would you tell like someone who is trying to change their physiology, who's trying to either lose weight, to gain some muscle, to like feel better? Where do they start in an area, or when they feel like they just don't know what to do? Right.
So for someone who's a novice who just doesn't know anything, and let's just, again, it's like those different scenarios all have different contexts, but let's just say like gaining some muscle mass and strength. So what I would tell an individual is that like without consistency, you're gonna fail. Reason being is because your body changes because you're giving it a reason to change, right? Your muscles will not grow, will not adapt. That's the scientific term. Adapt to it adapts to a stressor, right? It's not going to adapt when you apply that stress just one time. There's no reason for your muscles to go through all that trouble to get stronger and get bigger to adapt to that stress that you're applying that one time, right? But when you apply that stress, that tension, as I alluded to earlier, right, or talked about earlier, if you apply that stress repeatedly over and over and over again, now your muscle cells like, we need to adapt because this is going to damage our cells, right? And so take that physiological information and apply it to real life situations. What is the number one thing then? Is consistency / frequency, right? You got to expose your muscles time and time again, obviously in a proper way, where you're just not damaging your muscles all the time, right? A proper way where you're progressing to give your muscles a reason to change. Weight loss, right? Consistency applies there as well, right? So if you restrict calories one day and then you just don't do it the other days, that's not going to make a dent, right? Because there's no reason for any changes to occur within the body. So obviously, you know, you have to be consistent in terms of restricting calories. Everything needs to be consistent. So
how do you develop it?
You know, that's like a multifaceted question, right? Obviously, for me, it's like social influence, psychological influence. Those are huge players, right? Which I'm not an expert in. But I will say, like, just through experience and just at least being able to do some critical thinking here, if I could speculate, like, you know, one of the biggest factors is social and psychological influence on just being consistent, right?
The media you listen to, the people you're surrounded with.
It's just like if you surround yourself with lazy people, like what influence do you have from them? It has to be more so intrinsic motivation, right? And that is related to psychology. Like, how are you intrinsically motivated? You know, what is the source of that? Like, where does it come from? I don't know, right? So there's a lot of questions I can't answer. Obviously, I can speak on the physiology and stuff like that, and just my observations over the years of experience. But you know, there's not really one answer to like how do you become more consistent. But I do feel that everyone needs some extrinsic or external influence. And so whether it's social media, which I think could be great and also bad. You start watching that show Physical 100 on Netflix?
Dude,
Dude, I went to the gym like twice that day because I watched that show. I was like, dude, I want to be ripped.
Well, the hanging part on the first one, dude, I was like, that looks easy. And then you see like all these fit people falling.
Yeah.
I was like, I low-key want to try it.
Dude, I would drop like within the first 5 seconds, I think. Because like, I just know. And
you could
so
just hang like this though.
I know, it's all strategy. But anyways, just even looking at their physique, I'm just like, damn, dude, I gotta get to the gym. So I went to the gym like twice. Yeah. And so that's
some
like
real fit people there.
Yeah. So for me, extrinsic motivation right there. You know, there's influence.
You
from
understood everything
I see.
too, right? Because it's in Korean. Is it in Korean?
My Korean's pretty bad, but yeah, I could understand a lot of it, but I still need the subtitles. So I'm like reading and like watching at the same time. But that show's crazy. But that's just an example of what I mean by like people sometimes just need that motivation or that influence at least.
Motivational video, something, a book, anything.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. I see some ripped people on social media, even if they are like
roided out.
Yeah, roided out or whatever, and motivates me. Yeah,
still motivation.
And then I'm getting older now, so I'm just like approaching mid-age, I guess if you will. So it's just like when I see like mid-age guys like just looking like. And again, I'm just basing off aesthetics.
Sure.
They look good. They look healthy or whatever you want to call it. Like, it motivates me.
Yeah, and dude, so, I was working out a couple times with Mark Wahlberg, and he just turned like 51.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he looks great.
And he's like, bro, he's diced.
Yeah.
At 51.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, he could pass in his 30s, bro.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, like, that's motivating.
For sure. I watched like videos of The Rock, and I'm just like, dude, I'm gonna go to the gym.
Yeah.
And so I do.
Is The Rock 50?
I don't know how old he is, but he looks great.
Yeah. You can't really tell with bald people.
Yeah, you can't, right? Yeah, but if you look closely, you got some wrinkles.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's motivating, man.
What are you most excited for in your life right now? Because you did you did this journey. You kind of like started your business. You're like filling all these voids, and you're kind of doing what you love right now. And you're teaching young people and whoever, especially online. They don't need to be young, old, or whatever. Like something that you're passionate about. I guess like what are you most excited for in your life right now?
So I don't want to say like I'm like slowing down.
Sure.
But just my philosophies, like my intentions, my purpose as a professor has evolved over time. So I will be going into my 10th year as a full professor. So that's the last rank as in professorship. So I'm kind of like at the end, and so it doesn't mean I'm going to retire, but it's just like I'll still continue to contribute to this field. I'll still like mentor students and just be a professor, but at
not
this
necessarily
point,
doing all the research.
Not so much. I'm slowing down a bit, but it's become, I don't want to even say the word easier, but in reality it's like a lot easier because I've just been used to it now. And so, but I'm still very passionate about it. All the things that I love about it is still there. And so, and it's a great job. I have so much flexibility. I mean, we golf like middle of the week, and just I just love all these things.
Yeah,
and so
your friends probably love it.
Yeah.
Your golf buddies?
My golf buddies, and all the guys who have their own business, they have so much flexibility. So I have like a lot of flexibility in terms of my schedule. It doesn't mean I don't work hard. It's just I just get it done when I need to.
Working smarter, guys.
Exactly. So, but the things I'm most excited about is going back to like my entrepreneurial spirit is like exploring different business opportunities. And I feel like I have the ability to do that now because I just have a lot more flexibility in opening. And, I've always had the flexibility in determining my own schedule, but I focus a lot of my schedule and my time to my job at Cal Poly. But now I feel like I can kind of still do the same amount of work because I'm more efficient at what I do, but as I have more time to explore other things. So without getting into too much detail, because there's some things that, I want to keep private, but there are a few business ventures that I've been exploring. And so some have like, some are challenging in terms of like, it's not where I want it to be at this point. And that's just all part of it. I've experienced that before, and I feel like I can cope with these challenges because of my early experiences. And some businesses are like really exciting because it just looks like it's just going to ramp up pretty quickly. And
do you treat business like a game?
I do a little bit, but the thing is like the reason I can take the risk is because I feel like I've made some good financial decisions over the years. And so I could understand that. I can't just tell someone like, take the risk, do the business, because in reality you need money to start business and you need to have a good concept and, you need capital. Right. And so, and maybe partners too. And so, but for me, I think, up to this point in my life, I think I've made decent enough decisions where I'm in a good position to explore and take risks. And so I am taking risks. And
but it's kind of full circle in the sense that like you didn't have any capital when you were a college student and you took a lot of risks there too.
Yeah, right. And then the little capital I had, I dumped it all into something. So I can't really afford to do that now because I don't want to be living on the streets.
I don't want to lose everything that I got.
I don't want to lose my house. But so I do risk management, but it's manageable. And so if I do lose in these ventures, it's okay. You know, and that's the number one thing for anyone who's getting into a business. You have to know that you're not going to go crazy if it doesn't work out. Okay. Yeah, you always have to manage your risks, have backup plans, and do things strategically. Sure. And just understand if it doesn't work out. I don't want you to have that mentality. You have to know like this is going to work. But if it doesn't work out, you can cope with it, you know, and so that's really, really important. I've seen people go into like gambling debt and all that just because their businesses are failing and it's just a bad situation, you know, and so I think that will be the number one advice I would give any young entrepreneur. And I still consider myself a young entrepreneur. Sure. I'm not like, I wouldn't say I'm like, you know, well-versed in entrepreneurship, all aspects of it, but I'm learning, and that's what keeps my life a little bit more exciting. And interesting. And so, and the other aspects is like, I love my hobbies. Photography is one. And so, I have like another Instagram page that has nothing to do with my other one. It's just,
it's mostly landscape.
It's just landscape.
What triggered that? What triggered that inspiration to just take cool photos of mountains and make them really majestic?
Well, I appreciate that. And,
no, that's the way they make me feel though.
Yeah.
You look at it, it's super mystical.
You know, I actually it's never been described that way, but I do appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, growing up, I was a total jock. You know, I love sports. I dress like a jock. I wear like basketball shorts every day. And, you know, it's just totally into sports. But there was a big side of me that was very like into art. So as a kid, I also took art classes and I loved it, you know, and like just drawing still images and stuff like that. And so I think I was just always like into the creative arts. I just didn't really I wasn't very open about it though. And I think that was probably a social influence because I'm like around jocks all the time. And it's like kind of
like, what are you doing with that camera or that guitar? Or
it wasn't even a camera. It's just like if I wanted to draw something or I was like looking at photography, it was just like considered not manly or whatever, some BS like that. And so, you know, I was young and I just didn't want that to be open. But I was always intrigued by it. When I saw a cool photograph of like an animal or something like a National Geographic, I would just be like, dude, this is so cool. Like, how did they capture this? It was just something I was interested in. Again, I can't explain why. But I could see like my dad was also very artistic as well. Like he used to draw pictures for me as a kid. And I was like, dang, like he's pretty good. Like I wish he would just like teach me and, or like at least take it to the next level. So anyways, one day I just bought one of those cheap DSLR cameras and I just started shooting. And then I started learning just through like YouTube and like just talking to other photographers on how to edit. Like, because editing is like half the game, right? So it's just like how your editing style is so important to the art that you portray in your photography. And so I was really also into traveling. Like I try to take a big trip, 1 or 2 big trips a year. And then I also do a lot of outdoorsy, you know, activities adventures. Like backpacking and going to Yosemite, going to national parks, putting on a backpack, going in the backcountry. And so while I was doing that, I was taking a lot of photos, and then I started learning how to edit and making.
How many times a year do you go?
Oh man, so before the pandemic, I was going like on like at least a dozen trips.
A year? A dozen a year?
And some of them are just like you know, driving distance.
Okay. Like weekend trips?
Yeah,
or something like that?
But I would definitely do a big trip. Like the last big trip was I would say Switzerland, which was awesome. And that really, I think that is what like propelled like my photography skills, because there's so much to shoot. And so, yeah, just one day, and you can kind of see the progression. If you look at my very first post on that Instagram site, eddie.joe, you'll see the level of photography there. And then now, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but you could see the progression and the improvement.
Better.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is like, I feel like most people, they just think that they're going to get good at something with like a little bit amount of time. When in reality, it's like if you do something long enough, it's just like you're going to get better at it.
Consistency, right? You get better. And so it's just, I was just driven to just get better at it. I don't know why. I'll just sit there at night and just just start like editing photos, and I'll even take like other people's photos like from an iPhone and just edit it. And then you know, I got affirmation from people saying like, these are great. And then someone wanted to buy one. And then that's why I started posting it on Instagram.
So have you sold some of the photos?
Yeah,
That's
I sold
awesome,
some
bro.
just through Instagram. I don't have any pictures of myself. It's all like just
like the prints. You would print them out.
And I learned the business of like drop ship printing. So I could definitely start. I had thoughts of like starting my own like online store and just doing drop ship printing and sending it directly from the printers. But it's just that business was not like something that I was that intrigued with. And, you know, the profitability is pretty low. And so it's more of a hobby. Yeah. And if someone finds my work like appealing enough or they like it, they'll hit me up through the DMs and just say, hey, you know, do you sell this? Will you sell this photo to me? And I was like, yeah, I'll print it for you and send it.
Yeah.
How do you want it?
What does creativity do for you?
I don't know. It just
well, because like you do it, so obviously you create art, right? And like it makes you feel a certain way, or else you would not do it anymore.
It's a sense of this. It's a satisfaction of like seeing something that you actually created, right? And of course, it helps when people affirm that it's good. Which shouldn't be the main driving factor.
Art is subjective, right?
Yeah,
it means
subjective.
Something different to everybody.
Right, but for me, I think it's like it impacts me a lot more.
Okay.
I don't know why. But so if someone says it's good, it like hits me good, and I get so confident. Sometimes overly confident, and then someone would say, you know, they want like compliment it. I'm like, what the heck, you know? And so it does impact me a lot. I don't think I'm like seeking affirmation and that's the reason why I'm doing it, but I think it's just like seeing something that's creative from my own hands and someone like enjoying it.
Like it was not there without the creative desire for me to make it.
It came from my head. Yes. And so that leads to like my sort of my OCD-ness when it comes to like creating stuff. It takes me a long time to edit one photo because I'm super OCD about like everything. Yeah. And so that applies to so many different areas of creativity in my life. Like I do a lot of like home DIY stuff and it takes me forever because I just like need it to be exactly
the way you want.
Yeah. And
but that's a little bit different than most, I guess, like not most, some creatives, because like you see like artists out there, painters or something, they're super messy. They're not OCD at all. Yeah. But then you think this painting or whatever, it's so beautiful, but it's perfect in its own way, and you're like, that's interesting. I
don't get that. That's not my mindset. Like there's no judgment, of course. Yeah. But I cannot empathize because I'm not in that type of mindset. Yeah. So maybe I'm very basic as a quote unquote artist, I guess, like in terms of like I just want to create something cool that people enjoy. Yeah. But I know there are definitely artists that like create something just for themselves and it's like to them it's beautiful and they don't care what people say, you know. But that's just definitely not me. I'm just more like, I want to create something that's cool.
People enjoy.
Yeah. And so
besides yourself.
Yeah, besides
like,
myself.
This might be good, but I need other people to say it's good. It's for me to believe it's good.
Yeah, I'll be real with you, man. Like I'm not doing it for myself. I'm like doing it for myself in terms of like doing the hobby. Yeah. But when I like display it, it's like, of course I want people to enjoy it and say nice things and give me some likes or something like that. And so, when someone follows me just purely because they enjoy the photography on my Instagram, like, it feels good. Yeah. You know?
Why do you think you enjoy golf so much?
I think because it's the biggest challenge in life, man.
You think so?
I'm just kidding. It could be, but it's like golf is a sport where you're your own opponent. Yeah. And so.
When did you get into it?
I was into it when I was in college, but I just didn't have the means because I was so busy. Obviously, I told you my whole story, but I just didn't have the means to do it, like time-wise.
All the time, yeah.
And so, because
golf takes a long time. Yeah, you're playing 4 or 5 hours.
Like. Yeah, it's like pretty much half the day, you know. And so, in terms of your work day, and so, but now because I have so much flexibility, and it got like really crazy during the pandemic because everything was online. I wasn't having to commute to work or anything, so. I golf like 3 times a week.
That's awesome.
And my golf budget was just out the roof. And so I was like, dang, this is crazy.
You're probably saving it on gas though.
Yeah. And then I'm a gear junkie too. So I'm going into like the golf store, just like testing out all these things, buying stuff that I don't need. Yeah. But like thinking like a new driver would change my life, you know? So I'll just spend like, and so I don't know what it is about the sport, man. That's like a psychology that I would love to like explore because something about it is just so addicting.
Well, I think this is my theory on it. So as humans, we were like hunter and gatherers at the time, right?
Yeah.
So you would point at something, like you'd use a bow and arrow or a gun or like whatever, and you would shoot to survive. Right?
Yeah.
So like, why do we like seeing a basketball go into hoop? Why do we like? Why do we like seeing a soccer ball going into net? Why do we like seeing a golf ball going into the hole and like aiming it properly, right? So like, it's just like, I feel like as humans, we're just ingrained to like find the target and get it in, you know?
Yeah, you know, that's interesting because all sports are just like that. There's a goal, right?
There's always a goal.
And you have to get it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the whole purpose of sports, right?
Yes.
So that's interesting that you put it that way. Maybe as humans, we are.
I mean, most it's not racing or anything like that, but most times. But as humans, what?
Yeah, it's just like maybe we are innately like that. You know, that's why we have sports.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like it's like, why did humans create sports? It had to like come from something internal, like innate, right? Inherent to the human being.
And it's kind of crazy if you look at it objectively. I was like, why does LeBron James get hundreds of $1 million contract a year just to put a ball through a net?
Yeah, and people watch it. It's so interesting. So,
and it's like way more money than I guess like any professor would make.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just but like, is that entertainment?
Yeah.
Just as important as like discovering everything about the human body and like making people's lives better in that way?
Yeah, right.
Is it? Maybe.
Who knows, man?
Who knows?
Like sports and that competitiveness that people have, it's like, I think that's also a significant influence on.
And people identify like, I am a Laker fan, I am a whatever, and people will cry, and people will do all these other things for their team. Yeah. And I'm just like, people will put down half their house payment on like a bet. And I'm just like, what is going on? You know?
I think there's things that maybe there's just never an answer to.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like the mysteries of human life. You know, and so
that we will never find.
And never find. But yeah, man. Golf is just one of those things, man. I just can't explain why I like it. It's just I like it.
Similar to like your interest in everything.
And it's just weird because I'm a pretty mellow guy. Like when it comes to like, you know, stressful situations and stuff. Like I don't lose it, right? But golf, I'm just like a different guy. Like the times I custom modes is like during a round. And it's just like, God, I'm just so out of character when I play golf.
I know.
Maybe that's why I like it. Maybe I could just.
You're like, if I could be my true Eddie, like on the golf course, then I have one life.
My alter ego comes out when I play golf. Like I'm just like a really negative, like negative, aggressive, assertive, like passive aggressive individual. And that's so hilarious. Maybe that's why I like it. Cool, I don't know. But
where can everyone find you and like find your work and I guess like peer reviewed stuff too? Everything like that.
Well, so for social media, so the two social media accounts that I have, one is dr.eddiejoe,
and that's where the all
infographics, science, exercise science, nutrition, all that stuff is anything health and fitness related. I just like create infographics that are based on scientific, scientific information, scientific discoveries. Research. So I just kind of interpret research for just the general population
in a digestible manner.
Yeah, that one's has built a pretty good following over the years. And the other side is my photography, my landscape photography. It's just eddie.joe, eddie.joe. So that's just, that one doesn't have that many followers, but it's just like something it's just a platform I use to share my photography and my art. And so, it's just kind of, you would think both of those people are two different people, but no, same person.
Same guy. The man does everything, dude.
Oh man, dude. I just have a lot of interest, you know? And so I feel like, life's too short, so you gotta just explore your interest.
Yeah, I know. I feel like people always wonder, like, I don't know what I want to do all this stuff. Just do all of it. Yeah. Like, try as many things as you can because, like, one day you won't be able to, like, hike up a mountain or, go golfing or, just do it today.
If you have the means to do it, just do it, and if you don't like it after one try, then who cares?
On to the next.
Yeah, on to the next. At least you tried it. So I do think that way a lot. Yeah. So
thanks, brother. Thanks for coming on. That was a blast.
Dude, that was awesome, man.
All right, see you guys. Check Mr. Dr. Eddie Joe out, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.